Hi everyone, welcome to Manhwa Demon. Please don't forget to subscribe, enjoy the video.
The scene unfolded with a view of a girl and man sitting on bed. The man started to open her shirt's buttons. After opening all her buttons, he said, "All done." Meanwhile, the girl in her thoughts said, "How did I allow myself to grow south close with this man?" She, telling her past, said, "The husband I was forced to marry to protect my kingdom, the slave who seized the crown of the emperor and waged war across the world. The same man who would kill my family and destroy my home. However, a second chance is now given to us. Once everything is taken care of, I would like to share my secrets with him." She, kissing the man, said, "Would that this moment could last forever." While kissing each other, the man asked Canach, "Eusebia," he said, "whenever I look into your eyes, what we shared that day springs back to life. Tell me, has our promise truly faded from your memory?" Meanwhile, she, touching a flower, said, "Oh, I know this flower." She said, "You can find it in the north as well?" The man asked, "Really?" She replied, "Yes. You'll see once we're in Arka. We'll spend the day reading in the gardens, fasting on sweets. Would you like that?" The boy replied, "Yes, princess." Suddenly we get to know that it was all her imagination, and she said, "That would make me very happy." In the next scene we saw Arka, home to the arcane arts. Once, it was a mighty nation of arcanists whose progenies lived and breathed magic. But when mankind was stripped of this blessing, Arka lost its glory and diminished into a weak shadow of its former self. Left at the mercy of greater powers, the nation pinned its hopes on its only means of survival, a marriage alliance. Meanwhile, a golden-haired boy appears. He opens the door and shouts, "Tell me it's not true." He was Xander Catterall, second prince of Arka. He said, "It's not too late to reconsider, sister." Meanwhile, Dietrich Catterall, first prince of Arka, interrupts him and asks her to keep his voice down, while a lady was sitting on the chair. He said, "This is hardly a subject for outside ears." The second prince replied, "No, preposterous is what this is. You would force your own sister into becoming the wife of Canach Riadon?" She clenched her cloths. He continued, Have you any idea what sort of things are whispered behind our backs out there? They say Arka has purchased a coward's peace by whoring out her princess to the empire. A royal plaything for the bloodthirsty tyrant who slaughters dozens of lives a day for sport. He shouts, "Why, brother, why?" The lady named Eusebia Catterall, first princess of Arka, said, "Xander, that's quite enough." The second prince said, "Bia," with a sadness on his face. She replied, "It was I, not Dietrich, who wanted this marriage." She said, "I acted of my own accord, and I'd rather we moved on." The second prince wants to say something, but she interrupts him and said, "I'll be fine." He started crying and said to her, "I don't understand." She replied, "From now on, it is your duty to look after our father. Try to be a good boy and listen to Dietrich." He holds her tightly and started crying. She said to him, "But most importantly, take good care of yourself." The first prince standing there see them and said to her, "Thank you, Eusebia." He said to her, "The people of Arka owe their lives to you." She in her thoughts said, "I have always known that a marriage of love is a luxury for any woman born into royalty." In the next scene we saw their marriage. Someone said, "This union is Arcea's sole salvation in the face of Riadon's growing threat." She said to herself, "I need not mourn my fate. I should feel honored to give myself to such a cause." She was dressed as a bride in a white dress. The father said, "Eusebia Catterall, do you take this man, Canach Riadon, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She said, "I do." Meanwhile, seeing him, she said in her thoughts, "So this is the emperor of Riadon." The father said, "Then in the name of the goddess Vihar, gatekeeper of the beginning and the end, I hereby pronounce you man and wife. Let the kiss of vows seal your bond as one." He removes cloth from her face and asked her to close her eyes in a cold tone. And then they kissed each other. Canach asked her, "Are you right?" She, touching her lips, replied, "Ah, She glanced at him and thought, now that we've exchanged the kiss of vow, there really is no turning back. Starting today, this man is my husband. Canach, leading others on his horse, rise his sword and shouts, form ranks and prepare for departure. His servants replied, yes, your majesty. Meanwhile, Eusebia sitting inside the royal vehicle thoughts, even the wedding feast was rushed. It's as if I'm being snatched away as a hostage. Though it's understandable, given the circumstances. After all, Riadon has only just emerged as an empire, so the emperor shouldn't be away for too long. She thought, perhaps he's a man who prioritizes matters of the stage over his own. Although the rumors surrounding him all label him a butcher and a tyrant. She opens the window and see outside, she's seeing him thoughts, seeing him up close, there is something almost gold-like about him. A quick appeal. I have found that 96% of you guys just watch my videos and don't subscribe. These videos takes days to make. Please subscribe to the channel to show some support. It's plain to see that he inspires respect in those around him, unlike a sheltered princess like me who has no real experience of the world. Compared to him, I am. She, explaining her role, said, as the ruling house of RKA, the Cataro bloodline has received the blessing of the Arjunwood. In every generation, a Cataro awakens to harness the primordial magic that flows deep within the earth, protecting the realm as her guardian. She opens her hand and some sort of lightning particles appears and she said, I am supposed to fulfill the role this generation. She closed her hand again and said, but the feeble trickle of magic I possess is far from enough. She, calling herself a failure, said, can a failure like myself withstand the weight of the Empress Consort's title? She, bowing her head down, said, perhaps, I will be cast out once the Emperor grows bored of me. Pathetic Eusebia. Meanwhile, traveling through woods, someone wearing black dress appears behind the trees. That person do some kind of magic and make a magical ball. Eusebia noticed that person and said, What was that between the trees? Meanwhile, a magical arrow comes towards her and hit her. Canach turns back and asked, what happened? His servants replied, an arrow, your majesty. The carriage has been attacked. Canach asked, what about the Empress? Is she unharmed? Meanwhile, the arrow hits her, and she gets covered with blood. Dietrich, Prince of RKA, terrified about the safety of his kingdom. Dietrich convinced his sister Eusebia to marry in order to save his kingdom. Eusebia, trembling with fear, and said, I don't wish to go to Riadon or marry that horrible man. Eusebia again shivered with fear and said, please, brother. There must be another way to save our kingdom because just the thought of it fills me with dread. Dietrich despairly said, it pains me to see you suffer so, dear Eusebia. But what else can we possibly do at this point? RKA is dying. We have no recourse against the might of Riadon. Our fighting force are depleted. Our coffers are empty and we lack the territories to serve as our backbone. If only we had a wielder of supreme magic to protect us. Just as in times past. Dietrich said with sadness. Alas, this is our reality now. We must do what we can to survive. Suddenly, Eusebia struck by an arrow, then she thought his brother Dietrich was right. Eusebia lost her consciousness. The thoughts revolves in her mind that, had I possessed enough power to stand as Arcea's guardian? Had I been more useful for our people? This would have never come to pass. A trembling voice touched Eusebia's ear. Open your eyes, Eusebia? Empress! Empress! Eusebia recovered her sense, and she saw her body was in Dietrich's arms. Eusebia, shocked, that's me? She feels. She has died. There is her soul to see her body struck by an arrow. Eusebia saw Dietrich hold her dead body in his arms and blamed to himself by saying that it was foolishness to put my trust in these northerners' dog. I should never have agreed to play with their little game. Eusebia's soul shouting. No! Dietrich angrily said the alliance is null and void. Arkara shall pay for this betrayal with blood. Eusebia's soul said. No, wait. Eusebia's soul feeling hurts. It feels as though being torn apart. Her soul felt the footsteps of Dietrich and said no. Why won't my legs move? At this rate, RKA will face destruction. Dietrich returned home with all haste and prepare for war. The assassin said, At long last, the plan comes to bear fruit this day. Your Highness must be pleased. Dietrich said, Need I say it? He said, to be finally rid of that nuisance. I would say, pleased, is an understatement. Eusebia's soul said, What? Dietrich said, Shame. I would have liked to confirm her death myself. The assassin said, Rest assured, my prince. He said, The arrow struck true and pierced the heart. Death is certain. She hearing this gets shocked. Dietrich said to assassin, Bear in mind that his does not conclude our bargain. I allowed you to deal with my sister as you saw fit, only because you promised me the power to bring Riadon to hell. The assassin said, Then may it please your Highness to know that the impending war shall end with Arcea's triumph. Under the reign of King Dietrich, Arceia shall rise anew as an empire that spans across the entire continent. He stepping forward said, In any case, 'tis unfortunate that Canach decided to take Eusebia's body with him. The girl was born a mage, so her corpse would have proven useful. He said, Truly a shame indeed. Eusebia's soul said, How? Why? As the hooded figure promised, a bitter war soon ensued between Arceia and Riadon. As for me, I became a ghost trapped in the woods where I was killed. I was in hell, or so I believed. There was no better explanation for the tragedy I was forced to witness. She was standing in war seeing someone shouting, to the surgeon's tent, Hurry! And watch I did, unable to help, unable to make any difference. The war showed no signs of ending. Accusing Riadon of assassinating a princess of Arceia, my brother sought to win the war by rallying the other outraged northern kingdom under his banner. It did not take long for Canach to crush them. He seized triumph after triumph, sending Arceia ever close to doom. Everything lost its meaning in the wake of war. The forests and flower fields of my beautiful Arceia. The people whom I loved above all else. No. Xander. All of them faded away before my eyes, their cold, lifeless bodies a cruel mockery of my undeath. 3 years into the war, Dietrich was taken hostage and brought before Emperor Canach. Death. Death. Ugh. Foul, filthy slave. Dietrich said, You may have killed my family and plundered this noble land, but do not think that you have won. This curse of House Cateril shall hunt you to the end of time. Canach replied, I see. Then I pray you do not rest your raving, King of Arceia. Not even in death, so I may follow your screams and slay you once again. Orders, your majesty? Must you ask? Canach said, Feed them to the fire. Eusebia said, Brother, is this what you wanted? Was your ambition worth sacrificing the lives of your sister and father? Suddenly she starts laughing and said, Ha ha ha. She watching towards sky said, Hear me, O Argentwood. Then she started crying and said, Hear my cries and bestow your grace upon me. Take my soul, and grant another chance for your Arceia. She shouts while crying, Lend me your help so I may start over and prevent all of this from happening. Meanwhile someone said, Eusebia? And she gets shocked. A flash of light appears and someone said, My dear child. The Eusebia opens her eyes on her bed and said, Was that the Argentwood? Meanwhile her father and brother was standing beside her bed and watching her. Her father and brother seeing her awake gets happy and his father shouts, Eusebia. Her brother said, Bia. She blinked her eyes and gets confused. She said, Father? Xander. How? Meanwhile Xander hugs her. She's sitting on bed with Xander thoughts, this still doesn't feel real. She thought, I saw them with my own eyes. Corpses sprawled on the ground, dead stares into nothingness. Meanwhile, her father, standing with Doctor, coughed and said to him, "The princess suffered through the night. Are you sure this is just a side effect of the awakening?" Seeing them, Eusebia thought, and yet here they are, alive and breathing. The doctor replied, "There is no mistake, Your Majesty. The princess's eyes and hair have changed colors. We believe this to be proof of a chosen guardian. However, such a phenomenon has not been observed for the last 100 years, and we know little else about the matter." She thought, awakening? She, watching her hands, said, "I was 10 when I awakened to the magic within me. Have I been transported back through time?" She shakes her head and said, "But that doesn't make any sense. I must just be losing my sanity after that ordeal. This is no more than the hallucination of what they deranged mind." Xander, seeing her, said to her, "I don't want you to fall sick, Bia. You have to be with us for as long as you can." She touches his face and said, "He's warm, this isn't a dream or a hallucination." She started crying and Xander asked, "Bia?" Eusebia, with tears on her face, said, "The Arjunwood truly answered my prayers." She suddenly hugs Xander. She said, "Thank you for giving me another chance." Meanwhile, his father and doctor gets confused. She said, "I will not squander it, I promise." Her father comes and places his hand on her back. She, with tears in her eyes, said, "This time, I will protect my family and my kingdom, no matter the cost." In the next scene, Eusebia was sitting holding a flower pot and thought, "To achieve that, though, I need power." She, seeing the flower pot, said, "The greatest power in the history of the Guardians. The Arjunwood, patron deity of Arcea. In life she was a human sister to the goddess Vihar. After her death, however, she was reborn as a great silver tree in the forest at the edge of the world, which served as her grave. With their kingdom bordering this hallowed ground, the people of Arcea came to worship and revere the Arjunwood, and the forest in turn bestowed her gaze upon them. Those blessed by the Arjunwood became guardians of Arcea, heroes that protected the people against every disaster and enemy. But gone are the days of Arcea's glory, and the blessing of the Arjunwood has now faded with the disappearance of magic from the realm of men. When no guardians left to safeguard the kingdom, Arcea soon found itself on the brink of total collapse. My awakening was a single layer of hope for my displaying people. Felicitations, Princess. A guardian walks among us once again. I was the light and treasure of the realm. She seen the flower pot thoughts, until they discovered that I could not make use of my magic the way they wanted. The entirety of my power as a guardian was the ability to talk to trees and flowers. Perhaps something went wrong with my awakening. I'm a failure as a guardian. That's not true, Eusebia. We would not have become friends like this if you hadn't awakened to your magic. I'm glad that you were the one. Trees were gentle and kind. But kindness alone was not enough against the contempt of so many people. In my previous life I could only watch helplessly as Arcea faced doom, but things are different now. She touches the flower pot and a light appears from her hands. She said, "The Arjunwood would not have granted my wish without giving me the power to change the past." Meanwhile, a light appears from the flower pot, and she gets shocked seeing it. Suddenly a green plant grow out from the flower pot. She, seeing it, thought, "Is that it?" She gets nervous and thought, "I suppose I was hoping for something more impressive. But why did the Arjunwood bring me back to life if I can't have the powers I need?" She said, "I do feel that the magic within me is stronger." She, watching her hands, said, "But it's far from enough to save RKA from Canach." Meanwhile, someone knocked on the door, and she gets shocked. Someone said, "Hello, Eusebia?" She turns towards the door. Her older brother was standing there folding her arms. She saw him and said, "Brother?" He comes towards her, and she rises from the chair. He said to Eusebia, "I heard about your awakening." He, with a smile, said, "Which involved a great deal of pain, from what I've been told." "What a shame." He holds her from her neck and said the girl was a mage, so her corpse would have proven useful. She moves his hand away by pushing it, and he gets shocked. He said, Eusebia? She, standing in front of him, said, I'm sorry, Dietrich. I still fell sick. She said to him, I'm not at my best at the moment. You understand, don't you? His brother, with a smile, replied, Of course. You must be exhausted. He held her hand and said, I hope you recover quickly so we can have you back with us. She thought in her mind, everything he says feels like deceit. I wonder if it's because he showed his true colors in my previous life. She said to him, Could you please let go of my hands? He, still holding her hands, said to her, It hurts me to bring you this bad news when you're feeling so vulnerable. She asked him about the news, saying, What do you mean? What news? He, with a smile on his face, replied, Rather than celebrate our newfound guardian of RKA, there are many who have chosen to question the infinite wisdom of the Arjunwood. He said they've dared to doubt the magical prowess of our new guardian princess. She, after hearing this, gets shocked. She shouts, That's... Her brother interrupts her and said, I, for one, do not care for their blasphemy in the slightest. Your awakening was a true miracle. Of that, there is no doubt. He said, But you know what they say. Where there's smoke, there's fire. She gets shocked after hearing her brother's words. Her brother, with a smile on his face, continued his words, saying, Perhaps the people are simply desperate for their long-awaited guardian to show them the full extent of her powers. She replied, But I... He interrupts her again and said, holding her hands, No need to blame yourself, Eusebia. We are the bad ones to expect so much from a girl so helpless. She, hearing this, gets remember something and said in her thoughts, Wait, I remember this. The tone of his words and that look on his face. She gets a flashback when she goes to her brother to tell him about her magic. She rushed towards his brother and said, Dietrich, I can use magic now. She comes to him and said, I talked with the flowers in the garden. They showed me their beautiful memories. They were so pretty. Could this be a special sort of magic? I can't wait to find out what more I can do. His brother turns towards her and replied, Oh, my dear sister. To the people out there, this so-called magic of yours would be no more than a cheap parlor trick. How disappointed would our subjects be to learn that the power of their princess ends at prattling with weeds and leaves. She gets sad hearing this. Her brother said, That is why you must never let anyone find out about your powers. I will protect you, sister. The people out there will laugh at you and they will say, Is the princess yet to show her powers? And here I thought she was a guardian. Perhaps what she received is a curse, not a blessing. He said, You need not do a thing. Just stay in New York my side and trust in your brother. Meanwhile, coming back to the present, she staggers and covers her face with her hand. His brother asks, What's wrong? She suddenly feels something and said, I. Meanwhile, her bad self appears and said, holding her shoulders, Look at you. Still so weak. How could someone like you possibly protect RKA and exact justice? You can do nothing. She thoughts this. She, holding her head, thoughts, This is all just in my head. Meanwhile, her bad self said, The Arjunwood did not choose you. Your god merely wanted to watch you suffer all over again. She said, No. Suddenly she swings her arm and said, No. Her brother, seeing her, gets confused. He said to her, Eusebia? Are you really all right? She replied, I'm fine. She thought, I have to go to the Arjunwood. I don't know whether this was simply the caprice of a divine being, but I will find out what she wants from me if it's the last thing I do. He feels the intensity of weather and said, We should head back. Princess. Staying in such a cold, frightening weather. Not to be safe. There can be trail for going forward. It's not safe to be outside in this blizzard. The weather is too cold, princess. Not yet. Eusebia said, I cannot turn back yet. Weather cannot stop me to reach my destination. Eusebia courteously said that I will go to my destination by facing such troubling weather. Finally, Eusebia meets her father. She feels pain when Sha saw her father in such dying condition. The father saw Eusebia and said her by coughing. What do you mean, Eusebia? You wish to enter the wicked woods? Eusebia sadly looking at her father and said, Yes, father. Now that I have awakened, I feel I must present myself to the Arjunwood. Eusebia's father said to her that, My sweet daughter, none but the monarch of Rka enter the presences of the Arjunwood. Hyaging said only the king are allowed but a single audience throughout our lives. The Arjunwood is infinitely merciful. And yet, she can be as stern and fierce as a snowstorm. Once, I knelt on her hallowed ground and implored her to raise her mother from death. But she refused to grant my wish no matter how fervently I prayed. The resurrection of the dead, she said, runs counter to the will of the goddess Vihar. In the end I was left with nothing but grief and an ailing body damaged by the biting chill of those dread woods. Should something happen to you there? Eusebia said not to worry, father. I promise I will turn back if the blizzard worsens. I am the guardian of Rka and the princess of the Arjunwood's chosen bloodline. Our goddess will not spurn me. I know it. She will tell me what to do to save our kingdom. Perhaps it is the Arjunwood herself that is calling out to you. He said to Eusebia, take this with you. Eusebia said to her father, what is this? A heat-preserving pendant crafted by the dwarves. I had it procured for Rawson long ago. For your mother. May it serve you well. Eusebia take it from her father and said, The pendant. It's shielding me from the cold. Eusebia whisper, Thank you, father. I don't want to lose my loved ones again. I must do whatever it takes to change my fate and save everyone. There's only one way to left now. Your Highness? I may not have enough magic, but I still remember how to put it to use. Eusebia said, I'll use the only ability I have and commune directly with the trees in the forest. Can anyone hear me? Let me know if you can hear my voice. I wish to seek an audience with the Arjunwood. I beg you. Grant me entry into the forest. Boy said. The blizzard. It's subsiding. Eusebia said, it seems that the Arjunwood has answered me. Eusebia said to the boys, You two stay here and wait for my return. Eusebia said, it's so much colder in the woods. I can feel the cold right down to my bones. Eusebia feels a voice as someone saying her name. Eusebia! My child. Eusebia saw silver leaves. It's the Arjunwood. So we meet once again. What brings me to you this time? Eusebia recalled same words. This time? Eusebia feels that she has heard this voice before. She thought that it's the same voice I heard as I traveled back through time. Eusebia said to Arjunwood that, O great Arjunwood, ever watchful goddess of Rka, if I may ask, for what divine purpose have I been brought back to life? Eusebia said with hopefully that, What must I do to avoid the outcome I fear? Goddess of Rka replied her that, I have already pledged my soul to you before. I am prepared to uphold that promise. Eusebia said that, but I beseech you, grant me power so I defend and protect my people. In return I shall to be the instrument of your will. Goddess said, you seem to have misled yourself. While it is true that I have been watching you all this time, I have never answered your prayers. That privilege is reserved for monarchs of Rka alone. You know this. I do, but I am certain it was your voice that brought me back. I thought I was brought back to do your work. Go home, Eusebia. Your moral body is much too frail to withstand the biting chill of these wuda. Your dwarven pendant will not last long with this forest. Go home before you share your father's fate. Eusebia became sad and said, I don't care. I had rather perish Hera than watch everyone I love die in the war. without being able to stop it. Goddess said her. Oh, Eusebia! Eusebia requested again. Please! Let me protect them this time. Let me save RKA. With my own hands. Tell me what I need to do. Jidus said her, if that is your resolve. You leave me no choice. Though you were a guardian, your magic was weak. Because I no longer had enough power to share. Eusebia thought that. Thus, I am partly to blame for the pain you suffered in your previous life. Goddess said, I have decided to share with you what is left of my life force. Perhaps you may defy fate and change Arcea's future yet. Eusebia shocked and asked that. Your life force. She thought she cannot be trusted. There is nothing to stop you now. What could someone like you possibly accomplish? Eusebia said to herself, follow your heart this time, and succeed. Goddess said, by consoling her, taught you are fated to die a miserable death again. Just as in your previous life. Not this time. Eusebia said, if taught is my fatib, then so bite. But Eusebia raised her body and said loudly, I am done cowering in fear. In the other hand, guards slept and Captain slipped out of it and said, do your duty. Captain said him. Have you lost your mind? Garf awaked quickly and said, Sorry, sir. Captain said, don't lose your focus just because things have quieted down lately. You are a border guard. Guard said. I see nothing gets past. You. By seeing Eusebia, he said. Why, your highness? Blessing of Fihar upon you and RKA. They walked through Border's gate and he said to her, we've had far fewer casualties since you began watching over the borders. Eusebia replied, well, I'm glad I could help. He said, help is an understatement. The brambles you conjured on the walls have already doubled in their defensive capabilities, and the arrows and shields you crafted proved effective even against monsters. He said to her, forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I cannot help but feel a sense of camaraderie with you. It's as though we've been through a war together. She smiled hearing it and replied, war, you say? She turns and said, you're more perceptive than you seem. He gets confused. She recalled a moment when she was sent back through time. She said, 10 years have passed since I was sent back through time. A servant asked her, you should retire, princess. It's getting quite late. Eusebia, reading something, replied, just a little more. I still need to finish this. She said, the Arjunwood's boons strengthen my magic, and over time, I gain the ability to accelerate and alter the growth of plants. She thought, walls and dense woodlands can keep monsters away from our borders. Magic-infused arrows would be helpful too. Meanwhile, blood started from her mouth and felt on book. She wipes her face and said, we can't afford to be lax. Even in this life, I still hear disturbing news about Riadon and its Emperor Canach. They're expanding far too fast. At this rate, we'll be seeing their soldiers on our doorsteps before long. Our military has improved under my lead, but we're still too weak to face Canach and the Empire head-on. I won't give up. I won't let him destroy RKA this time. I will do anything to protect my country. Meanwhile, back in future, a guard rushed towards them and shouts, urgent news, your highness. A message arrived from the Empire. From Canach Riadon himself. She, hearing this, gets serious and thought, even if that means I'll have to marry the man. Meanwhile, a man starts reading Canach's letter. I have only one demand, your princess. You may keep the rest. The man said, that's the entirety of the message? A man furiously shouts, to ask for the hand of the princess in such a manner. Has he no shame? The second man sitting next to him said, that savage will not have Princess Eusebia. Meanwhile, she, holding a cup, thought, these are the same people who readily surrendered me to Canach in my previous life, and now they're defending me because they know I'm useful. She thought, the only thing that hasn't changed from the past is Canach's demand. He, the slave who broke his fetters to rise as an emperor. His struggles could have been just as tough, or even more degrading, than the life I had to endure. I wonder if that's what made him into such a cruel and ruthless man. She thought, that's none of my concern, though. Her brother said, then what do you suggest, my lords? Do you truly believe that we stand a chance against the might of Riadon forces? Lord shouts, Your Highness. Dietrich continued his words saying, nothing pains a brother more than to send his lovely little sister to the land of savages. He said, but as the crown prince of Arcaea, I must think of our nation first. Meanwhile Eusebia standing there hearing her brother's speech thought, pretty words. You just want to get rid of me. Meanwhile her brother asked her, you understand, don't you, Eusebia? You are the guardian of Arcaea, after all. Eusebia smiled and replied, of course, Dietrich. She said, I have been waiting for this opportunity all my life. 1 week later Dietrich comes in Eusebia's room and said, congratulations, Eusebia. She sitting on a chair asked him, what brings you here at this hour? He replied, must you be so cold? I only wanted to say my farewell before you leave for Riadon tomorrow. He said to Eusebia, we won't be seeing each other for a while. Be gentler to your family. She turns her face other side and replied, I'd rather we kept this brief. Dietrich threw a blue necklace in front of her and said, here. Eusebia picks the necklace and said, a necklace? Dietrich said, not just any necklace. I see you are yet to refine your tastes. He tells, it's a sending crystal. The enchantment on it allows long-range communication. Take it with you to Riadon. He smirks and said, and report to me what you learn of Canach during your stay there. Hearing this she gets confused. She asked him, you want me to spy on him? But why? I thought this was a marriage alliance. He replied, in name only. A perfect way of buying time until we get what we want from them. She gets shocked hearing his brother's words and said, this won't end well if Canach ever finds out. It could cause a war. He smiled and said, could? Oh, my sweet, naive sister. We are preparing for war. That's why I have come to see you tonight. She gets shocked and said, preparing for war? Dietrich said, we will strike the moment Riadon lets its guard down. All the kingdoms of the north have already forged an accord. Besides, there is another ally who supports my cause, an ally with powers beyond imagination. He clenched his hand and said, with enough preparation, slaying Canach would be a simple enough task. She squeezed the necklace and thought, an ally with powers beyond imagination? Why didn't I realize it sooner? Dietrich couldn't have gotten his hands on a magical item this rare without a powerful sorcerer crafting one for him. He must have joined hands with that hooded figure again. Another League of Northern Kingdoms, another great war that will throw the continent into chaos. Dietrich noticed her silence and asked, well? Say something. She, still lost in her thoughts, said, if I refuse him here, he'll go for the next available alternative, causing a war by having me assassinated. She thought, is there no way to prevent fate from repeating itself? I thought my efforts were enough to stop Dietrich in the war, but we are doomed to repeat the same future after all. Dietrich said to Eusebia, tell me, Eusebia, did you possibly think that marrying Canach would solve all our problems and bring lasting peace to Arcaea? He turns his head and said, piteous fool. I had no idea you were this blind. Eusebia asked, what do you mean? She slams her hand on the table and Dietrich, showing her some papers, said, there. Read them. Secret documents I brought just for you. He said, guardians of Arcaea are cursed to remain barren for life. Becoming a guardian means dedicating your entire being to the Arjunwood's service. You will be unable to use your powers outside of our kingdom, and there will be no hope of passing your magic onto a child of your womb. Your body, my dear Eusebia, lost its ability to procreate the moment the Arjun would choose you. She, hearing all this, gets shocked and said, lies? Dietrich tells him, it's true. I found those secret documents hidden deep in the forbidden archives that only the king of Arcaea may enter. He said to her while she was in a shock hearing this, Imagine Canach's rage and disappointment should he discover that the bride he purchased with an alliance is a barren woman who cannot give him any heirs. Dietrich holds her shoulder and whispers, "The fire of his anger will burn our beloved RKA down to ashes." She gets shocked and pushing Dietrich back she shouts, "Lies. I will hear no more." He calms her and holding her shoulders said to her, "Think about it. For all the wealth of information available on Guardians, not one name of their children is mentioned in the chronicles." She said, "I don't believe you. It can't be true." Dietrich said, "But what if it is? Must I watch silently as the end comes for us all?" Meanwhile, changing scenes, we saw Canach having a bath in a pond. His servant holding his cloth said, "They ambushed us the moment we crossed the border." "Well, a prey without armor is an easy target, Your Majesty. I'm not surprised these assassins chose to strike." He turns back and moves his hand towards the servant saying, "Shut up and just give me my clothes." He said to his servant, "One needs to look clean and fresh before receiving a princess." In the next scene we saw Eusebia and her lady servant. Her servant asked her, "It's rather chilly, princess. You could catch a cold if you stay outside much longer." Eusebia replied, "I just need some fresh air." Her servant making her hairs said, "It worries me to see you looking so pale on your wedding day. Did you have trouble sleeping last night?" Eusebia remains silent. Meanwhile she thoughts, last night after Dietrich left. She recalls the moment Dietrich and she shared last night. Dietrich said to her, "Well then, take the time you need to think about it." After he leaves, she started to read about what he said to her. She said, "Hi, I spent the night scouring through the chronicles of RKA." She said, "So it's true, not a single time mentioned anything about the descendants of the Guardians. Children of mages inherit the ability to use magic. That's probably why Canach wants to marry me, to produce an heir who can harness magic. Guardians, however, are different from natural-born mages. Our magic is a blessing given by the Arjunwood upon selection, not at birth." She thoughts, Dietrich was right. Guardians cannot have children. I cannot have children. She get worried about Canach's reaction after knowing that she is barren. She said, "What should I do now? The Emperor might break the alliance should he learn that I am barren." Meanwhile someone shouts, "Hearken, people of RKA." Hearing this she gets shocked. "His Majesty the Emperor of Riadon has come to you to seal the marriage alliance between our two nations." Hearing this she comes forward to see what's happening. Her servant stopping her said, "Your Highness." She see down and found Canach standing there with his army. His soldier shouts, "Open your gates and receive the Emperor with respect and honor." She seeing Canach thoughts, it's him. Canach Riadon. Eusebia sitting on a sofa starts thinking ways to stop the war. She thoughts, I must think of a way. At this rate, the alliance will fail and I won't be able to stop Riadon's invasion of RKA, no matter what I do. She starts biting her nails and said, think. Then she remembered about last night and said, last night, Dietrich tried to win me over to his cause instead of having me killed as he had done in my previous life. He even revealed the truth of the Guardian for that purpose. He likely regards me as a useful pawn in his game. That's it. So long as I appear useful, he will think twice before getting rid of me. She said, and now I must do the same and prove my worth to the Emperor. I must tread carefully and keep the secret of the Guardians from him. Meanwhile Canach enters in the room. He seeing Eusebia said, Princess Eusebia? She gets nervous seeing Canach. She steps towards him and said, I am deeply honored to finally meet the Emperor in person. Meanwhile Canach reached to her and touched her face. She gets shocked. He said, you seem unhappy about this marriage arrangement. Eusebia gets confused and replied, on the contrary, Your Majesty, 'tis is a great delight for me to become the consort of the EMP. Canach with a smile on his face interrupts her and said, your lies are as sweet as those lovely lips of yours. She said, I would never dare lie to you, Your Majesty. He said, could you stop calling me that? She gets confused and said again, Your Majesty? He sighed and replied, there you go again. I'm not used to these high-born manners, and I would prefer to be called by my name, if that's all right with you. She said, Forgive me if I have displeased you, your majesty, but propriety demands that I. She stopped and think, what's going on here? Did this happen in my previous life too? Canach asked her, if I start calling you by your name, will you do the same for me? She thinks, no, this is not the man I remember. In my previous life Canach Riadon never paid me a private visit before the wedding ceremony. Canach said, Eusebia? She, still lost in her thoughts, said, nor did he never call me by my name. Canach said, Do you not know my name? She starts waving her hands and said, I do. She called him by his name, see Canach. She again starts thinking, I don't understand. In the next scene Eusebia's servant with tears of hot pines in her eyes said, I don't know how else to say this. She, looking at Eusebia in her wedding dress, said, You're so beautiful. Eusebia, standing in front of a mirror, said to her servant, There, Cecile. Dry your tears. Her servant, whipping her tears, said, It breaks my heart to see your highness forced into such a hastily prepared wedding. You deserve so much better, princess. You should be walking down the aisle in a prettier wedding dress. Meanwhile Eusebia in her thoughts said, This is already extravagant enough compared to what I had to wear before going back in time. Her servant starts crying and hugs her. Her servant said to her, Please don't leave us, your highness. Eusebia said, Don't cry, Cecile. It's not as if I'm riding out to battle. It's just a wedding ceremony. She said, Still, leaving for the empire means I am putting my life on the line? This man, who is to be my husband, has taken my motherland hostage and expects an heir who can wield magic. And the only way to protect my people is to make him believe that I can fulfill his demands. They hold each other's hands and she thoughts, husband and wife? The father standing beside them said, In the name of the Fihar, the gatekeeper of the beginning and the end, I hereby pronounce you man and wife. Meanwhile she thoughts, No. Enemies crossing blades on the battlefield. The father said, Let the kiss of vow seal your bond as one. Canach removes cloth from her face. She thoughts, he still looks the same. Not a blemish on that perfect face. She thoughts, he seemed more a god than a man at the time, but after what I'd witnessed in that war, he no longer inspires awe within me. This is not a bond of matrimony but a tool that I must use wisely to maintain peace. Ichi gets close to her and tries to kiss her. She thoughts, no matter what he does, my heart must remain. He interrupts her kissing her. She gets confused and shy. She thought stone cold. Canach said to her, Are you all right? He holds her and said, Eusebia? In the next scene they started to leave. Eusebia, seeing the servants' thoughts, no wedding feast this time. They appeared to be in a greater rush to leave than what I remember. She turns towards the palace and touching her necklace she recalls her brother's words, So you have finally decided to join my cause. You made the right choice, dear sister. Your decision shall open the path towards Arcea's salvation. She thought, salvation? How absurd. Meanwhile Canach interrupts her saying, That look on your face, every moment must be painful for you. She gets confused. She turns her face backward and sees Canach following her. She said, Your Majesty? She turns towards him and thought, Should I fail to give him an heir within the next several years, he'll realize that I'm infertile. If it comes to that, my plans to foil Dietrich's scheme will end in failure. Canach said, He, turning back, said to Eusebia, I shall join you shortly. She gets confused and asked, I beg your pardon? Canach, standing next to carriage, said, I am aware it is considered taboo here in the north for the groom and bride to share a carriage. He kneeled down and said, But I cannot in good conscience leave you alone after seeing how badly this is upsetting you. He moves forward his hand and said, After you. She, seeing it, gets shocked and said, Your Majesty. Canach said, Get in, or you would be keeping the emperor on his knees for all to watch. She gets confused after seeing this all. She, giving her hand to Canach, thoughts, How strange. Different things are happening now that didn't occur in my previous life. She steps on his thigh and his hand. She thoughts while entering the carriage, first, he visits me before the wedding, and now, he's kneeling for me. I should remain indifferent, but I cannot help but feel a faint pull that wasn't there before. I'm not sure what to make of all this. Does this change herald a brighter future for us all, or is it an omen of misfortune? They were passing through a forest. She sits beside Canach, seeing outside from the window. Canach said to her, "You still look upset." She replied, "Upset?" Canach said, "Are you feeling unwell, or are you planning your escape from the marriage you never wanted? Which is it?" She gets angry hearing this and shouts, "That's a ridiculous accusation." She said, "As your lawfully wedded wife, I am now beholden to the duties of the Empress consort." He smiled and said, "Duties? HM? Quite. Are all princesses as devoted as you are?" He turns his head towards her and said, "Were you merely fulfilling another one of your duties, when you kissed the man you despise before the marriage altar?" Eusebi replied, "If I may be so bold, your majesty, whatever is the matter with you?" She said, "You seem to believe I can't stand the sight of you." Canach sighed and said, "I have been wanting to ask you since the moment we first met, what sort of person am I in your eyes?" She replied, "The Emperor of Riadon is a well-respected hero." She said, "Tales of your valiant feats had reached my ears well before the marriage talk began. Including the matter of your origin, of course." He said, "I'm not interested in the stories they tell about me. I am asking what you think, madam. Who am I to Eusebi Cataril?" He asked to her, "Do you see me as a hero too?" She gets confused. She replied, "I to me, you're..." Canach said, "That's what I thought. We're married now, but you're not even trying to conceal your distrust of me. You remained white as fresh snow even after the ceremony ended. It's as if you found the whole affair repulsing." He said, "My suspicions were correct. This marriage, it's..." Suddenly she thoughts, "I can't let him annul the marriage." She rises and shouts, "You misunderstand. I don't find you or this marriage repulsing. I simply..." Canach asked her to sit back to her seat, saying, "Return to your seat. You might fall if the carriage comes to a sudden STO." Meanwhile, the horse carrying the carriage suddenly rises his legs up, causing the carriage to stumble. Eusebia felt shouting, "Ah!" Canach said, "Eusebia?" She closed her eyes. Meanwhile, Canach catch her, and she opens her eyes, finding herself in his arms. He said, "Eusebia?" Canach asked her, "Are you hurt anywhere?" She, finding herself in his arms, gets uncomfortable. Canach said to her, "Eusebia?" He said, "Is something the matter?" He holds her face and asked, "Are you in pain?" One of his servant interrupts, saying, "Is everything all right, your majesty?" Canach asked him, "Why did we stop?" His servant bowed and replied, "I humbly beg your majesty's forgiveness. A fallen tree is blocking the way. The men are already playing the part. We will soon be ready to depart." Canach gets confused and said, "That tree was still standing when we entered RKA." He saw Eusebia trembling and said to her, "Eusebia." Eusebia thoughts, "The power of the guardians comes from the Arjunwood. Outside of RKA, we are severed from this blessing. Our dire secret Dietrich revealed to me that night." She said in her mind, "I thought he was lying. But it's really happening. I can feel my magic leaving me. Without my powers, I won't be able to defend myself against attempts on my life." Meanwhile, her inner self in a spirit form comes and said, "Yes. This must be your brother's ploy to have you assassinated. This is what he's been planning all along. He wants to get rid of you and start a war." Eusebia said, "Enough." The spirit said, "Poor clueless Eusebia. Once again you will perish here, alone and in despair." Eusebia starts crying and said, "Stop it. I won't hear another word. Please." Canach said, "Eusebia?" He hugs her, and she gets shocked. Canach said to her, "Try to breathe as slowly and deeply as you can. Look around you, nothing has happened, and you are safe." There is no one here who wishes you harm. She holds him and with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, after some time, Canach said to her, I owe you an apology. She gets confused and said, What for? He replied, For bothering you all day with my attitude. Perhaps that's what made the journey so exhausting for you. I deliberately sought you attention, because you didn't seem to hold me in high regard. He clenched his hand and said, Although I was already aware that a woman of your caliber would not be content with me, it was still hard to accept the truth. He said to Eusebia, But no matter what you think of me, I will not annul our marriage. The peace between our nations shall hold. I give you my word. She, hearing this, gets confused. Canach said, So if you can, pray do not look at me with such fear in your eyes. Meanwhile she thought, I think I know now why he seems different from what I remember. I never had the chance to speak with him privately in my past life, which is why I never really thought about getting to know him as a person before today. She said to him, I was not lying when I said I'm familiar with the tales of your heroic deeds. She recalls the moment when she learned about Canach. Oh, the irony. It was to gain a better understanding of my enemy that I first started following the records of Canach's rise to power. The more I learned about him, however, the more I began to doubt whether he was the same person I knew from my past life. A former slave who fought to free others like him and liberate the people from the tyrannical rule of the previous emperor. This man, could it be that he's... She said to Canach, I do not fear you, your majesty, nor am I displeased with this marriage arrangement. She said, Thank you for helping me again, my calm, Canach. Hearing this, he gets shocked. She smiled and said, You wanted me to call you by your name, did you not? Canach gets confused and said, Eusebi. Meanwhile someone interrupts saying, Your Majesty. She thought, seeing outside, the harbor is in sight. The future has been changed. I still draw breath. And no one has broken out between RKA and the Empire, yet. What lies ahead is still a mystery, but she, seeing outside through window, thinks, everything will be alright. I know it in my heart. Meanwhile a green-haired boy asked to his servant while holding his tie, What could His Majesty be thinking? Isn't it too soon for the wedding ceremony to end? Did he truly rush out of the chapel the moment they said their vows? From what I recall, he'd been going on about marrying the Arcean princess for an entire month. His servant said, A message arrived, my lord. The Emperor's courage has left the woodlands. The green-haired guy said, Is that so? Phew. Well then, let's go and see what kind of lady our esteemed Empress is. In the next scene, Eusebia, seeing the port, said, Oh. She said, seeing a ship, what a grand ship. Canach, holding her hand, replied, A regular vessel won't be able to cover the long journey that lies ahead. Mind your footing, it's hard to see in the dark. She said, Your Majesty, worries too much? I have my eyes wide open. Meanwhile she slipped and Canach catch her. She said, Thank you. It seems I really should have watched my footing. Canach, holding her from her shoulder, said, Please allow me to assist you. She said, Oh, I can walk on my own. Canach said, I insist. You might have fractured your ankle. Eusebia said, I'm not made of glass. The green-haired boy, seeing them, said, What a surprising sight indeed, Your Majesty. Canach, seeing him, said, Oswylen? Eusebia thoughts, Oswylen? The Aslan Veinar? Aslan said, My sincerest apologies for the belated introduction. He bowed and said, Lord Oswylen, at your service. Riadon Empire's first Secretary of the Interior. Baron Aslan Veinar. Aslan Einar, a man of humble origin, born to an impoverished country baron. He lifted his house from dire straits with his uncanny knack for turning a profit. The lessons he had learned from his own life taught him to judge others by merit and not bloodline. And this allowed him to recognize the greatness within Canach Riadon, who was no more than a lowly slave soldier. As Canach's strategist, Oswylen guided the evolution to victory. thereby securing a position of power in Riadon's imperial court. Eusebia, seeing Aslan, thoughts, how could I forget? His name was always mentioned alongside Canach's in all my investigations. It feels as if I'm looking at a character straight out of a legend. Aslan said to Eusebia, is there anything I can assist you with, Your Majesty? She replied, no, Canach said, Aslan is not only a dear friend of mine, but also a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Interior. It wouldn't hurt to have him as acquaintance. Eusebia said, I see. I am Eusebia Catterall. Well, Eusebia Riadon now, I suppose. Canach gets confused and she said, pleased to make your acquaintance, Lord Aslan. Canach blushed and Aslan said, the pleasure is all mine. Shall we board the ship now? Canach said, of course. Canach said to Eusebia, take my hand, Eusebia. She said to him, I told you, I can walk on my own just fine, Canach. Everyone starts whispering and Canach said to her, but you are almost tripped and fell without my help. She said, well, Aslan said, how heartwarming to see the Emperor and our new Empress being so intimate in public. Eusebia thoughts, using the Emperor's name in the presence of his lessers may appear inappropriate. Eusebia said, thank you for the reminder. I will. Meanwhile, Canach interrupts her, saying to Aslan, she's my wife. She has every right to address me by my name. She gets shocked. Aslan replied, with all due respect, Your Majesty, propriety and decorum must be observed no matter what. Eusebia said, let's all take a moment to calm down. Canach said, that doesn't sound too convincing coming from a man who calls me by my name at every opportunity. Eusebia said, that was only in private. Aslan said, you should not forget your own advice, my friend. Propriety and decorum must be observed no matter what. She, hearing all this, gets shocked and confused. She thought, oh no. This is turning into an argument. Come to think of it. Canach was quick to control his temper when he realized that I was not feeling well. He also showed concern when he saw me losing my balance while stepping out of the carriage. Perhaps he's the sort who reveals his forgiving side when others are vulnerable. She shouts, Canach. She said, I feel faint. May I retire and rest? Aslan and Canach get shocked and Canach said, you feel faint? Canach pulled her and said, forgive me, I should have noticed. Huh? He picks her in his arms and said, let me take you to your room. She shouts, ACK. Eusebia said, please, I don't need to be carried. Seeing this, everyone gets shocked. She shouts, put me down already. Canach brings her to her room and said, this is your room. He said to her, let me know should you need any. He said, are you sure you are just feeling faint? Your face is flushed. Perhaps it's a fever, she said. I'm fine, Canach. She thought, that was so embarrassing. Meanwhile, she noticed a dress and said, Is that a dress? A green dress was laid out on bed. She comes towards it and asked, was this laid out for me? Canach asked, do you not like it? She sits beside it and touches it. She said, I do. It's beautiful. This shade of green is just what I like. She thought, I can't recall anyone ever gifting me such a lovely dress, even back in RKA. She turns towards Canach and said to her, I'd like to meet the person who prepared this dress and thank them personally. He replied, that won't be necessary. Canach said, it was me. Eusebia said, thank you. I will treasure it. Canach said, it's only a dress, Eusebia. He said to her, anyhow, I should leave you to rest. I have some pressing matters demanding my attention, but I will return once they are taken care of. She asked, return? Here, you mean? He leaned down and said, yes, we are married now. He said, spouses should sleep together, no? She gets confused and thoughts, I hadn't considered that. She said, does that mean? We will be sharing a bed starting tonight. She thought, he wishes to spend the night in this room? Is he saying that he wants to share my bed tonight? Well, he made me for an heir, so I knew this was bound to happen. But it's far too soon. I assumed he'd wait until we reached Riadon and perform the deed when he couldn't afford to delay his marital obligation any further. What has him in such a hurry? Could it be that he finds me desirable? She blushed and thought, I'm not thinking straight. Even if he does find me desirable, he'll realize that I'm infertile. Should I fail to bear his seed after sleeping with him? Canach holds her chin and said, Eusebia? She thought, no. Canach holding her chin said, I'm only saying this out of concern. But sharing a bedchamber does not necessarily mean we will be consummating our marriage. He said to Eusebia, you are not only the Empire's but our newlywed bride. It would not reflect well on you if we were to sleep in separate rooms on our wedding night. He said, but rest assured, I don't intend to force myself on you. She said, I only wait upon your pleasure. Canach said, no, I would rather not fulfill our nocturnal obligation on rocking ship. He turns and said, besides, climbing into the bed of an unwilling companion is something I found distasteful. She said, you mean? Canach replied, yes, I will wait until you feel ready to consummate this marriage. She gets shocked and asked, but why? I thought you were anxious to have an heir from me. Canach said, 'Tis only our first night together and my bed is already eager to secure the realm's succession. How blessed I am to have found such a dedicated wife. He holds her hairs and said, I'm in no great hurry, Eusebia. He said, if you truly wish to give me an heir, pretend to love me at the very least. He said, although we started out with a political marriage, I hope to see genuine love blossom between us. After a few hours Canach was sitting in thoughts, Eusebia. He recalled the moment when Eusebia said, but why? I thought you were anxious to have an heir from me. Canach thoughts, this is harder than I thought. He said, or perhaps it's better this way. It will be easier on us both. That she doesn't remember the past. He said, this way we can start in. Meanwhile Aslan in hurry comes and shouts, Canach! Aslan said, what's this I hear about sending our men to protect our keen borders? We never discussed this with us. Canach said, the people of Archaea are left without their guardian because of us. We must do what we can to make up for that. Aslan said, this marriage alliance with Archaea is complete and utter nonsense. He comes towards Canach and said, we are clear to them in every respect. What's to stop us from subjugating that nation of milksops? You demanded neither the mining rights nor the treasure in their vaults. You are risking the lives of your loyal soldiers for the hand of some pampered princess. Canach said to Aslan, choose your words wisely, Aslan. Canach said, Eusebia is not just some pampered princess. I am prepared to throw away everything and more for her sake. No price is too high when it comes to her. Aslan in anger shouts, unbelievable. What's gotten into that head of yours? Canach said, get out. The room's already stuffy enough without your constant fuming. Aslan shouts, stuffy? It's freezing in here. What's the matter with you? Meanwhile Eusebia in her room feels sick. NNGH. Ugh. She thought, I feel sick. What's happening to me? Is this a side effect of the Arjunwood's powers leaving me? She rising from her bed thoughts, I can't let Canachas find out that I'm losing my magic. Her vision gets blurry and she thoughts, I will ask one of the servants to get me some medicine. I must stay strong. She unconsciously said, is anyone there? Fetch me some medicine, whichever you have on hand. Canach hearing this said, medicine? Are you not feeling well? She said, Canach? She tries to move back saying, it's only a mild headache. I'm fine. Canach grabs her from her arm and said, you're clearly not. You are looking awfully pale. I'll send for a fizz. Meanwhile she starts feeling nausea and MPH. She thought, my stomach is churning even though I haven't eaten a thing. HRK. She vomit on Canach's shirt. Suddenly she gets shocked realizing what she have done. She said no. She said in her mind, what have I done? Canach said to her, You should have let me summon a physician. Eusebia? She starts trembling. She said, I beg your forgiveness. I did not mean any disrespect. Meanwhile, in her thoughts, she said, what should I do? I already started off on the wrong foot, and now I go on and soiled his clothes too. He must be furious with me. I wouldn't be surprised if he's having second thoughts about this marriage. Her inner self again comes and said, blunder after blunder, you can't seem to do anything right. Whatever is the problem? Eusebia? Is it really that hard to please the Emperor? You have already lost your magic, the only thing Canach wants from you. Keep making these mistakes, and you will be hastening your own demise. She said to Canach, I'm tribally sorry, Your Majesty. I'll clean up the mess immediately. Canach said, no need to trouble yourself. It's hardly worthy of your concern. She said, but I dated the Emperor's clothes. Canach removed his shirt and said, there we go. Problem solved. He said, I can simply put one of my shirt, and it will be as if nothing happened. No need to hold yourself accountable for over something so trivial. Eusebia, sitting on sofa, said, I fear I may have displeased you. Canach, closing his shirt's button, said, why should I be displaced? He sits beside her and said, I'm not ignorant enough to raise an eyebrow at someone who's visibly seasick. She asked, seasick? Canach, checking for her fever, replied, yes, seasick. Canach asked her, this is your first time traveling on a ship, correct? I should have made better arrangements for you. In any case, you shouldn't let this little thing bother you any further. But still, this reminds me of my days on the battlefield. He said, there was a time in my life when I was always on the move from one battlefield to the next. Back then, I met a young man who began shadowing me relentlessly, begging for the chance to join the revolution. And what a boot licker he was. I will serve you to the end of my days. I will gladly lay down my life for you. You get the picture. One day, we happened upon the corpse of a decapitated soldier and... What the? He asked, can you guess who that young man was? She shook her head for a no. He said it was Aslan. Aslan said, I can't take it anymore. She thoughts, the Aslan Vainar? Canach said, and instead of apologizing for that unpleasantness, he blamed me for picking out that led us to the corpse. She gets shocked and said, I can hardly believe it. She starts laughing and said, who would have thought he was once such a delicate young man? I'm beginning to suspect there's a big softy hiding behind that tough shell even now. Canach replied, well, after several years. He conveniently chose to forget what a cry-baby he used to be. He said, that's how time works. It's magic. A few more voyages like this and today's little mishap will fade away from your memory. It's no more than a drop in the ocean when you put it into perspective. Eusebia asked, a drop in the ocean. She thought, I wonder if he feels the same. About the horrible things he had to witness in his youth. Mere drops in the great ocean of his memory. If that is indeed the case, how unkind life must have been to him. I wish I could learn more about the real Canach Riadon. Not the ruthless man portrayed by the chronicles and rumors. Meanwhile, a boy rushed toward Eusebia's room saying, oh no, I'm late. Phew, he starts trembling. He knocks the door and said, Your Majesty? Canach said, that's him. Eusebia asked, are we expecting someone? Canach replied, yes, I sent for the court physician. He said, where is he, the little crook? A court physician should always be at the ready. Eusebia said, it's still dark outside, Canach. The sun hasn't even come up yet. Canach asked the boy, what are you waiting for? Come in and do your work. The boy said, I humbly beg your Majesty's forgiveness. I wanted to make sure everything was ready. Canach said, enough with the excuses. The Empress needs you. The boy bowed and said, 'Tis is a great honor, madam. Seeing the boy, Eusebia gets confused and said, The physician boy introduced himself to Eusebia saying, I am Simon, the court physician. Eusebia, seeing the boy, thoughts, That boy is the court physician of Riadon? The boy asked. Is something the matter, Your Majesty? She thought, I'm staring. Aren't I? Eusebia introduced herself to the boy saying, Hello, Simon. I am Eusebia, Princess of RKA and now the Empress of Riadon. Thank you being here at this early hour. The boy replied, I am happy to be of service, madam. Canach gets angry and said, Are you done talking? The Empress suffered a great deal while you took your sweet time. Now tell me what ails her. Eusebia said, Canach, please, I already feel much better. No need to reprimand him so. Canach said, Negligence has its consequences, Eusebia. Canach asked the boy, Well, what are you waiting for? Get on with it. The boy rushed towards Eusebia and said, At once. While the boy was checking Eusebia for feverish thoughts, he's shaking. He must be afraid of Canach. She holds his hand and asked Simon, Was it? How old are you? He replied, Turning 18 this year, Your Majesty. She said, You're about the same age as my younger brother. She said, A young man of 18 and you're already the court physician of Riadon. You must be a master of your craft. Simon replied, I still have a long way to go. She turns toward Canach and said, Nonsense. The emperor would not trust an unskilled man with such an important position. She asked Canach, Right, Canach? Canach said, He does have a quick mind such as he is. A single glimpse is all it takes for him to memorize things. I placed him at court hoping he would come in useful one day. Not everyone can perfectly memorize human autonomy charts at such a young age, after all. Eusebia said, See? He thinks you are an asset. He likes you. No need to be so jumpy around him now. Simon gets so happy and said, Your Majesty. He said, Your Majesty, your honors me. I am by no means a man of many talents, but I intend to serve to the best of my ability. She said, Thank you, Simon, it's showing to know that we are in good hands. After Simon leaves, Canach sits beside Eusebia and said to her, Simon's a timid boy. He doesn't easily warm up to new people. You must have made a great first impression on him. She replied, That's good. Canach said, Good? She replied, Yes, I thought I was expected to get acquainted with your inner cycle. Is there a problem? Canach asked Eusebia, Was holding Simon's was your way of getting acquainted with him? She hearing this gets confused. She thought he seems upset. Understandable. He probably expects his wife to maintain some distance from other men. She said to Canach, I'm sorry. Canach said, No, don't apologize. It was not my intention to scold you. She said, Simon reminded me of my brother. I couldn't just sit there and watch when he was so evidently distressed. As for holding his hand, I learned from your example when you took me into your arms in the carriage. You showed me how the soothing touch of another could help in moments of panic. But in the future I will try to be more mindful of how I should approach others. He sighed and said, Oh, Eusebia? She asked, Yes? He puts a candy in her mouth, she said, Is there MMPH? She asked, What's this? Canach replied, Something to clear your palate after that bitter medicine. She after eating it said, Candied raspberries? These are my favorite. Canach said, Go ahead and eat your fill. There's plenty more. She said, I am eating to my heart's content. Canach said, But you still haven't swallowed the berry I put in your mouth. He said, Just like a little rabbit nibbling on a leaf. They both stare each other. Eusebia starts blushing. Canach said, Simon's medicine should kick in soon. You'll be feeling better before you know it. It's getting late. Try to get some sleep. While Canach was leaving, she asked, What about you? He replied, I still have some paperwork to go through. She asked, Are you heading out again? He said, No, I brought the paperwork here. I can't leave you here alone until we can be sure you are okay. Rest now, Eusebia. I will be keeping watch by your side. After a few times she wakes up and finds Canach sitting in front of her. She thought, so he was serious. He hasn't left the room. He doesn't take offense at my lack of decorum. and shows proper care and concern for my well-being. I wonder if he truly sees me as a spouse. He must learn to love and protect. If this marriage alliance can bring lasting peace between our people, perhaps I too could learn the same. She suddenly think about her brother, Dietrich said, "My dear Eusebia, that is a dream well beyond your reach." She holds the blanket and think, yes, I cannot give Canach the heir he wants. He'll cast me aside once he realizes that I'm worthless. His generosity and kindness will turn into cruelty before long. She closed her eyes and think, I can't afford to be distracted. I am here to stop him from destroying RKA. Should I allow him to sit through the ruse? She turns towards other side and thought, everything will have been for naught. The ship sails over water in a bright sunny day. Eusebia wakes up and noticed that Canach has left. She said, he's gone. A servant asked Eusebia, are you sure you want to go out, madam? Perhaps it's best that you take some more rest until you're fully recovered. She wearing the green dress Canach gave her replied with a smile on her face, not to worry. I feel much better now after a good night's sleep. Besides, this is my first time traveling on a ship. It would be a waste to sleep the day away in the cabin. She comes outside and seeing the sea gets astonished. Seeing the sea, she said, so this is what sea looks like. The guard shouts, hail to the Empress. She gets shocked. She turns and said, thank you for your hard work, gentlemen. She noticing the guard's thoughts, the same look I saw on Aslan's face last night. They're still wary of me, every one of them. No surprise there. To them, I'm no more than a stranger. She in her mind said, Riadon is a newly emerged empire. What Canach really needs is not Arcea's magical pedigree, but a consort from Riadon's nobility who could help garner support from his subjects. Instead of meeting the expectation of his people, however, Canach choose to make a foreign princess from an obscure and diminishing kingdom. Hence their thinly veiled misters, if not open dislike. I didn't have to face this sort of problem back home because mages are treated with respect in RKA. Now I'm suddenly scared to discover what lies in store for me in Riadon. Meanwhile Simon rushed towards her shouting, Your Majesty. He said, thank goodness. I have been looking for you everywhere. Madam? She asked him, if it's about last night's symptoms. I assure you I feel fine now. Your medicine worked like a charm. Simon said, it's chilly today. You might end up catching a cold if you spend too much time outside. And should it come to that, know that your negligence will not be overlooked. Canach comes and said in a cold tone, Court physician. Simon gets shocked and said, Canach? He holds Eusebia's arm and said, you weren't in your cabin when I returned. He picks Eusebia in his arms and said to her, come, let's get you back inside. She shouts, She said, Canach, please? Put me down. Canach replied, the ship's rocking too much. I don't want to see you take another tumble. Meanwhile Simon said, phew. He picking her in his arms comes inside and Eusebia said to him, your retainers would hate to see their emperor behaving in such a manner. He asked, are my manners the issue now? She asked, you are a figure of authority to your people. It would be inappropriate for you to be seen carrying a woman in your arms everywhere you go. He said, Eusebia, there is something that I should have mentioned to you sooner. He leaned toward her and said, this is the reason that I sought to wear the crown. He said, I want to change things, you see. To build a country where people can live their lives in freedom, unfettered by the chains of etiquette and hierarchy. Canach said to her while putting her on bed, you need to worry about what my retainers would think. Those in my immediate service have learned to respect me for who I am. Those who had made the mistake of looking down on me, well, they're long gone. She said, but meanwhile she saw some sort of books. She picks one and asked to Canach, what's this? He said, I brought some books for you while you was asleep. There's not much to do in the cabin, after all. Eusebia said, they have books here. Canach said, books are excellent traveling companions on long voyages. These came from the bookshelves of the palace library. He asked, or do you not like reading? She replied, hugging the book. I do. She said, I love books. I try to read whenever I have time. But I've been too busy of late. Canach said, then perhaps we can spend some time reading together. They both starts reading books and she thoughts, Riadon truly is an impressive empire. These are all her books, and they've been kept in pristine condition. They say Riadon's library is the largest in the continent. Canach's penchant for books must have been the reason. The more I get to know him, the more new sides I discover. I always pictured him as a battle-hardened soldier, not someone who would spend time in and engrossed in books. She seen Canach said, so that's what he looks like when he's deep in thought. She recalls her past life. Reading was a favorite pastime of mine, even in my previous life. Without much company at the palace, I nursed my bitter loneliness by reading the works of others. It allowed me to peek into the lives and thoughts of writers I had never met. But now, she closed the book and hugged it. She thinks, now I know how it feels to have someone who shares my enthusiasm for books. It would be lovely if the life that awaits me in Riadon turned out to be just as peaceful. Saying this, she fell asleep. Canach, waking up her, said, Eusebia? Eusebia. He shakes her, she said, She wakes up and seeing him said, Canach? What is it? Canach tells her, the ship is now making port. We will be entering the imperial palace very soon. They left the ship and enters in the city on a carriage. Eusebia said to her, should you not, perhaps make an appearance before your people first? She pulled the window and said, you are attending with a foreign princess as your wife, after all. Your subjects must have been waiting for the destruction with bated breath. Canach replied, there will be a public address in a few days. They'll get the distraction they want then. He said, if possible, I'd like to introduce you to them. After holding a more fitting wedding ceremony here in the capital, what we had in RKA was not more than a mere formality. She tilted her head and said, was it? Canach said, a proper show of ceremony will cement your place as the Emperor's consort. Welcome to the Imperial Palace, Your Majesty. A servant said, I am Marianne, head of the Imperial Household Staff. She bowed and said, preparations have been made to ensure your comfort, madam. Eusebia replied, thank you, Marianne. Allow me to give you a brief tour of the palace to help you settle in. She thought, the whole palace is a testament to Riadon's wealth and prosperity. No wonder RKA lost the war in my previous life. We underestimated Canach and failed to see the importance of understanding our foe. She noticed something and said, She points her finger at a building and said, that building seems different from the rest. The servant said, ah. The servant tells Eusebia, that manor is recent addition to the palace complex. Would you like to visit, madam? She thought, interesting. It looks exactly like the old palace in RKA. Later, perhaps. I would prefer to complete the tour of the Grand Palace first. The servant said, yes, Your Majesty. The wing on the second floor has been furnished for your future children. She, showing Eusebia her bedchamber, said, and this here is the Empress's bedchambers, which will function as your apartment in the Grand Palace. She gets astonished seeing her room. She said, this might be too extravagant for me. The servant said, we took the liberty of having your bath drawn, madam. Nothing like a warm bath after a long journey. Eusebia thanks her, saying, oh, thank you. She, seeing her bed, gets astonished, and the servant standing beside her said, I shall also remind the staff to ensure that everything is in order for tonight. She turns towards the servant and asked, for tonight? The servant said, yes. His Majesty and Madam will spend the first night together in the palace. Canach enters in the room and said, the room seems to have changed while I was away for work. Eusebia said, Marianne and the servants paid special care to make this a memorable night for me. Canach said, a memorable night, That explains the gown. She said, oh? Eusebia, wearing a blue dress, said, it's too much, is it not? Canach said, it suits you too much, is what? I gave you my word that we wouldn't take the next step until you were ready. But when I see you like this, she gets confused hearing this. Canach clenched his hand and said, never mind. He steps towards the bed and said, you must be tired. Let's go to bed. She said, I'm sorry, I confess I'm not too well versed. She said, in the affairs of the bedchamber, unlike yourself. Canach said, why apologize? I'm not exactly an expert myself. Canach blushed and said, I too haven't been intimate with anyone else. She asked, really? Canach asked her, why do you sound so surprised? She replied, because you are the emperor. Rulers are encouraged to secure their line of succession early on. He sits on the bed and said, or could it be that you prefer your men experienced? That's a rather difficult problem to tackle. I can't get out there and educate myself. Eusebia replied, I meant no such thing. It was just a little unexpected, that's all. He said, the problem remains though. Neither of us truly knows how to initiate things. Shall we give it a little practice first? She asked, practice? Canach, holding her hand, said, yes, holding hands is always the first step I heard. He said to Eusebia, and maybe we can lie down next to each other and see where it goes. Meanwhile, she in her mind said, what should I do? She said to Canach, one moment, I feel uncomfortable in this gown. I'll go get changed in the next room. Canach stops her, saying, wait, Eusebia, it has buttons on the back. He steps towards her and holds her shoulder. He said, I could lend you a hand, if that's all right with you. Canach reaches to her and touches her back. He starts opening her buttons and asked, may I? Canach opens her gown's buttons sitting on the bed. After opening all buttons, Canach said to Eusebia, all done. She said to Canach, thank you? Canach replied, it was nothing. Eusebia, lying in bed in front of Canach, thoughts, how embarrassing. I made the emperor do the job of a handmaiden. Canach said, are we not going to practice, Eusebia? She got shocked. Kanka moves his hand towards her and said, come closer. We're supposed to be holding hands. She, giving her hand to him, said, all right. She said, you had your own cabin during our travels. It must be uncomfortable for you to share a bed now when you're more used to sleeping alone. Canach replied, it's fine. I'd actually been spending every night in your cabin. She asked, really? Canach replied, yes, on a sofa next to your bed. I only used my cabin to wash up and get changed. She said, that must have been tiring. Why didn't you sleep in your own bed? She sweats and said, while sleeping, no, Dietrich. Canach said, because you seem to be having nightmares. He said, I promised I'd watch over you, did I not? She said, you're not at all what I had in mind. Before we crossed paths, all I ever heard about you were the most chilling tales. I expected an emperor who sees the throne through bloodshed and evolution to be stern and unforgiving. But you are more approachable than I thought. She said, I was worried that I might not be what you were looking for in a wife, and he touches her face and said, nonsense. I couldn't have asked for a better match. I want you to know I don't regret sealing our union before that marriage altar. He said, believe me, Eusebia. You will always be needed here. She replied, it's a relief to hear that I am grateful to you. Meanwhile, in her thoughts, she said, needed HM? I shouldn't be getting ahead of myself. He has something he needs from me. There's the sole reason I was brought here. He only wants a broodmare who can give him a child capable of using magic. On the next morning she wakes up and finds roses and said, flowers? She touches them and thought, they weren't here last night. Perhaps one of the servants brought them here. Meanwhile the servant come and said, Your Majesty. She, standing in front of her, said, I trust madam had a pleasant night? Eusebia replied, I did. Good morning, Marianne. She rose from the bed and said, I had the most relaxing sleep I've had in a long time thanks to these flowers. The scent is really soothing. The servant said, "Very good, madam." She bowed and said, "Is there anything else your majesty requires?" Meanwhile Eusebia in her thoughts said, She is committed to her duty and her manners are impeccable. And yet, she has her guard up around me, just like the rest of these Imperials. I should remember not to let every little thing get to me. There is much to do. Wallowing in self-pity will only slow me down." Eusebia said to her, "A light breakfast, perhaps. I have plans right after." She asked, "Plans, madam?" Eusebia said, "I'm thinking of taking a look around the palace library." In the next scene we saw Eusebia in the palace library. After seeing it she said, "Incredible." She asked, "How did they manage to fill up a library this big with so many books?" A servant standing behind her replied, "We have been accumulating unique pieces that have never been formally published, madam. Such as transcripts of folk tales and spoken poetry." She turns back hearing this. Eusebia asked him, "Is there a section dedicated to magic?" He raised his hand and said, "Yes, your majesty. Materials on magic are housed in the secret archives that only a secret few may enter." He said, "Including the Empress, of course." She peeks inside and said, "Ah." She said, "I'd like to go now, if you don't mind." She, touching the books, thought, "I can't wait to see what hidden lores lie within. Some of these books might offer more information about the guardians of RKA." She noticed a green book and said, "That book. Is that what I think it is?" She picks the book and sits on a chair. She, seeing the book, thought, the heyday of magic ended centuries ago. Studies on magic should be hard to come by. But they had one right way all along. They say non-human races still use magic today, unlike humans. If anyone knows more about Arcean guardians, it's them. 300 years ago, swarms of blasphemous abominations invaded the realm of men, threatening even the sylvan body of the Arjunwood and her domain. The very land cried out in agony. And answering that cry was a warrior of Catarrhal blood who arrived to purge the abominations. When her task was done, the warrior vowed to forever stand as the guardian of the Arjunwood's hallowed forest. Her steadfast devotion immensely pleased the goddess Fihar, who blessed the Catarrhal bloodline by allowing its members a fraction of her divine might. The fragile flesh of mortals, however, proved to be too weak a vessel for Fihar's divine power, and the Catarrhals were forced to stabilize their souls by binding themselves to the Arjunwood, never to know the joy of ordinary existence again. She said, "I already know about all of this. There's only one known exception to this fate. Shinasa Catarrhal, eternal friend of the Sylvan Elves, and savior of woods. Shinasa surpassed the limitations of her mortal body and bore a child who received the favor of the Sylvan Elves. These eldritch beings who make their home in the hidden lands still mourn and long for their dearest friend and guardian." She, reading it, thoughts, Shinasa Catarrhal. According to the chronicles, she's a guardian who was active 300 years ago. But how did she come to be with a child? Guardians lose the ability to procreate upon awakening. Eternal friend of the Sylvan Elves. I wondered what she did for them to earn such a title. They could stop here. I should probably seek out these elves and get more information on Shinasa. But where can I find them? Meanwhile Canach comes in and said, "Eusebia?" She rise from the chair and said, "Ah." "Canach?" Canach asked her, "What are you still doing here?" Stepping outside from library, Canach asked her, "I heard you miss your meal. Do you enjoy neglecting yourself?" He said, "It was quite a sight to see your servants running around in panic. I'm not surprised anyone would be worried with the Empress missing from the Grand Palace throughout the day." She replied, "Oh, I'm sorry, Canach." She, with an innocent face, said, "I completely lost track of time in there." Canach asked, "Giving me that look won't get you anywhere. Do you have any idea how worried I was today?" He said, "I thought." She asked him, "Are you angry?" He sighed and replied, "I'm not. I simply never mind. I shouldn't have raised my voice." She said, "But he didn't raise his voice at all." He holds her hand and said, I won't reprimand you for spending time in the library, but you need to start looking after yourself. He said, you are ready to frail and I'm worried about you. Truth be told, I had a feeling something like this would happen. You love reading, after all. He said I should have been more. He moves forward saying, attentive to your needs. He opens the door and asked her, come. She steps in and said, oh. She asked, what is this place? Canach tells her, a garden designed with you in mind. Was the least I could do to impress the princes of Arcaea. She seeing flowers said, it's beautiful. I see flowers. She reached to the flower and touched it. She seeing those flowers said, how lovely. Canach asked her, are those your favorite? She replied, I like my flowers small and dainty, especially when they come in a variety of colors. Canach said, I'm glad you found something to keep yourself occupied. She hearing this gets confused. He said, but remember to take breaks and get some fresh air. And please don't skip your meals again. Canach said, there are other beautiful gardens around the manor. You can also explore them in your spare time. That manor is a recent addition to the palace complex. She thought, I call Marianne mentioning it. Does that mean he had the Arcean-style manor? And the greenhouse gardens? She thinks, build for my sake? I know I can't let him mislead me any further, but it's difficult to remain ignorant when he is so kind to me. She touching the flowers said, that's strange. The flow of mana is especially strong around this flower. Canach said, is something the matter? Eusebia replied, no, I. She glanced and said, I was just admiring flowers. She thought, using magic should be impossible outside Arcean soil. Perhaps I've somehow managed to retain just enough magic to converse with plants. She reached towards the flower and thought, I'll need to talk to it without Canach noticing. She touches the flower and thought, gently, slowly. Suddenly a voice come from the flower saying, no. No. She hearing this gets shocked. The voice from flower said, why did you come? Save yourself. Fully as far as you can. She turns back and thought, flee? From whom? Canach gets confused seeing Eusebia and said, Eusebia? What's wrong? The voice from flower said, go now. Or you will die here. 1 week prior. A girl in a black dress wearing a black hat and a man in red dress comes to the garden. The man asked, have you given it any thought? The girl replied, it doesn't matter how many times you ask. My answer will remain the same. The man said, come now, loosen up a little. This could work out well for the both of us. The girl turns and said in anger, you will not insult me, sir. If there is one thing that has kept me going all these years, it's the pride I have in my profession. The man said, pride? Ha! A fine word. He asked her, tell me, what value is pride compared to your precious little sister's life? She hearing this clutched her cloths. She said, how do you know about Edie's? He steps towards her and said, just take a moment to reconsider. I'm not asking you to do the impossible here. All I need is an occasional whisper or two on how a beautiful foreign empress spends her days. He said, which should not be a problem for you since you've been assigned to her service. She asked, but... He gives a smile and said, your presence here tonight, my dear. She turns back and he said, tells me that my offer has captured your interest. She starts trembling and the man said, I am confident we can get along famously. Wouldn't you agree? He shouts her name, Marianne? And we found that she was Marianne. In the next scene she was walking through a street where 2 guys were coughing and fell sick. She comes to her home with a worry on her face. Her sister was sick and she was sleeping on her bed. She enters in house and said, Edie's? It's me. She sits beside her and said, I'm sorry. I wish I could visit more often, but things have gotten even busier at the palace lately. She said, I brought your medicine. Her sister was sweating due to fever. Seeing her she recalls the man's words, let's see, your sister is dying from the rigor, yes? I can only imagine how worried you must be for that sweet, innocent girl. She's your only sister, correct? I've heard about the disease. It's a mysterious plague that has been spreading through the realm lately. Without regularly taking curative mana potions, the afflicted is doomed to die a horrible death, with a body stiff as a days-old corpse. We live in a world where magic is dying out, and prices are going through the roof by the day. And once it takes hold, the plague refuses to let go. How hard it must have been for you, my dear. He said, do this little thing for us, and we will ensure that you are rewarded handsomely. Imagine what you could do for your sister with riches that commoners can only dream of. She hearing this asked, we? Does that mean there is someone else giving the orders? The man replied with a smile, oh, I cannot disclose such a dire secret to an outsider. You must accept my offer first. Take your time and think it through. She sitting next to her sister said, what must I do? Changing scenes, we are Aslan giving some papers to Canach saying, here are the expected quarterly tax revenue from the West, Your Majesty. He said we have included a set of tax reform plans for your consideration. Canach replied, thank you, Aslan. Canach said, keep up this pace, and we will be able to present a finalized tax reform plan to the Parliament by the next session. Aslan, hiding his shoulders, replied, yes. And it will no doubt ruffle more than a few feathers. He explains, traditionalist nobles will spare no effort to derail the bill, as if their lives depended on it. And if we let them do that, they will try to abolish the civil service examination we have implemented next. Throwing the papers on table, Canach said, of course they will. Aslan shakes his head and said, after all, they still believe in the outdated nonsense that only those of noble blood are fit to rule. Canach said, the same people who consented to crowning a slave soldier as their emperor. Aslan said, but they never consented, Canach. They merely submitted. And the thing with submission is, it usually bounces back in an uprising. Please do not forget that, sire. Canach stands from his chair saying, ugh, those old snakes. I would have had them beheaded alongside that tyrant had they not been instrumental in securing my throne. Aslan said, we both know you wouldn't do that, being the good ruler you are. Canach, standing in front of window, asked, a good ruler, am I? He said, no, I'm simply tired of spilling more blood in this land. He thought about Eusebius saying, you are not at all what I had in mind, Canach. He thought, I wonder if you'd still call me a hero and like me. He clenched his hand and said, if you saw my past. Changing scenes, we saw Eusebius sitting in garden. Someone muttered, Eusebia is probably in the gardens. Marianne comes to her and asked, you summoned me, madam? Eusebia stands and said, yes, Marianne. She gets confused. Eusebia said to her, there is something I would like to ask you. Marianne asked, how may I serve you, madam? Eusebia replied, walk with me, please. She said to Marianne, this might take a little while. Eusebia asked Marianne while walking, it's warm today, isn't it? Marianne replied, yes. Eusebia said, a gigantic greenhouse garden made entirely of glass. I could hardly believe what I saw when I first came here. She, reaching towards the flowers, said, and the flowers, they are so different from our Arcean varieties. Meanwhile, she thought, it was quite a shock at first. With magic waning in this world, I never imagined I could communicate with plants outside of RKA. She recalls the moment when the plant warns her saying, go now, or you'll die here. Canach asked her, seeing her shocked, what's wrong, Eusebia? She replied, nothing. She said to Canach, I thought I saw something. It must have been a trick of the eye. Meanwhile, in her mind, she said, what do you mean I will die here? Please, I need to know more. The plant tells her about Marianne and the man meeting, saying, the woman among your retainers, the head servant. She's been meeting a suspicious man in this garden. They were talking about you. Eusebia inquires, Marianne. She asked the plant, can you show me your memory of that night? I'd like to see what really happened. The plant replied, all right. The plant starts glowing and said, take your time. We're on your side, all of us. Then the plants show her everything. He opens her eyes and said, "So that's how it is." Meanwhile, Marianne asked her while she was touching the flowers, "Your Majesty?" Eusebia replied, "Sorry about that. My mind wandered off, watching these lovely flowers." She asked Marianne, "Do you like flowers, Marianne?" She replied, "I think they're pretty." Eusebia starts laughing and said, "Haha, that's one way of putting it." Marianne said, "I do not dislike them, madam." Marianne tells her, "It's just that things of beauty wilt all too easily. And that is what I fear." She said, "My sister is the real enthusiast when it comes to flowers." Eusebia asked, "Oh, you have a sister?" Marianne replied, "Yes, madam. She's 10 years younger than me. Our parents left us too soon, and I had to be a mother for her. She's been living alone ever since I took on the position of head servant." Eusebia said, "That must be quite rough." Marianne said, "Nothing would ease my mind more than to have her come live with me here, but the afflicted have no place in the palace." Eusebia asked, "Afflicted?" Marianne gets sad and tells Eusebia about her sister's illness. She has the rigor. "I have been looking for a cure everywhere, but..." Suddenly she stops and apologized to Eusebia. She said to Eusebia, "I beg your Majesty's forgiveness. That was inappropriate of me." Eusebia replied, "That's all right, Marianne." She holds Marianne's arms and said, "This is precisely why I called you here. To get to know you better." She tells Marianne, "I see you attending to my needs every day, but I don't even know who you really are." Eusebia said, "Which is far from ideal, given the part you play in my private life." She, with a smile on her face, said, "I hope it's not too late for us to try and get along with each other." Marianne said, "Madam." Meanwhile, Eusebia thought, I had interpreted Marianne's cold demeanor as prejudice against a foreigner, without realizing that I was the one jumping to conclusions. Things would not have come to this had I been more attentive to those in my service. She said in her mind, "I thought I'd learned enough not to repeat the mistakes of my previous life, but it seems I still haven't broken free from that habit, hiding from people without taking the time to understand them. And that has to change because I am no longer a naive princess who died spending her whole life stuck in a shadowy corner. I am now an empress whose duty is to observe and guide the people of this nation." Eusebia said to Marianne, "Not to worry, Marianne. I will find a way to help your sister." Marianne gets confused and said, "Your Majesty should not be concerned with such trivialities." Eusebia grabs Marianne's hand. Holding her hand, she replied, "Nonsense." Eusebia, with a smile on her face, said, "You are my responsibility now." She said in her mind, "It's time to stop running away." Hearing this, Marianne gets shocked and confused. Eusebia said, "I will do what I can to make a difference." Eusebia went to Canach, and seeing her, he said, "Eusebia? What brings you here?" She replied, "Well, you've been kind enough to visit me in my quarters. 'Tis only right that I do the same for you." She said, "Or am I interrupting something?" Canach stand from her chair. Aslan tries to say, "Madam, this is an urgent dash." But Canach pushed him back and said to Eusebia, "No, not at all." He said, "I was just wrapping up." Eusebia replied, "Oh, perfect." She asked him, "Would you like to join me for dinner then?" Eusebia was invited by Canach for a delicious dinner with him. It was a surprise for Eusebia. She does not have any idea about that dinner. Eusebia said, "This must come as quite a surprise to you." Canach said, "I did not expect you had agreed. I invited you out of the blue, after all." Canach said to her that the timing was ideal. It was nearly dinner anyway. Canach said to Eusebia excitedly, "I am glad you took the initiative." Eusebia, feeling not good, she said, "Why my face feel hot?" At this time her cheeks were blushing. Eusebia's face became red. Now she said, "I feel bad for putting the cooks through extra work." Eusebia said, "They seem to have gone all out to prepare this for us." Canach, surprised for Eusebia's reaction, and said, "Really?" But it's the usual fare. Eusebia thought in her mid. Usual fare. At the next moment she rapidly said, "Oh, I almost let slip that I tend to have quick dinners while reading in the library." Canach said, "Now I am starting to wonder what your day to looks like." He said, "It's good timing you came to me today, or I will not have noticed that you have not been taking proper care of yourself." Eusebia thought in her mind that there is still so much research left to do. The Secret of the Guardians. A course for the rigor. She thought, we will eat together every day from on now. Oh? But you are a busy man. Distracting you from your work is the last thing I want. By giving her a slice of cake, Canach said, "You are more important to me." Canach said, "I would not want to see you pass out from starving yourself." Canach said, "Here. Raspberry cake. Your favorite." Eusebia thought, "So that's on your mind?" "Pardon?" Canach said, "Well, there must be reason you wanted to see a busy man like me." Eusebia thought in her mind that you can talk to me. She said, "It's about Maurice, the head servant." He said, "I see. That must have been quite a struggle for her." Eusebia said, "Do you know her well?" Canach said, "Of course. I was the one who brought her to work here." While sitting on dining table, Eusebia asked to Canach, "Do you know her well?" Canach replied, "Of course. I was the one who brought her to work here." He said, "Marianne is a professional who's been officially trained in stewardship. Impeccable manners, meticulous attention to detail. No one else was more qualified for the position. I did notice her regular excursions outside the palace, but never pried. I had no idea she was going through such tough times." He sighed and said, "No one could possibly focus on work with a sister dying from the rigor." She said, "Which brings me to say, Canach, I would like to have her sister live in my manor here in the palace. That way, Marianne could take care of the girl without getting distracted from her duties." He asked her, "Why not send her to the palace hospital instead?" He said, "Simon and the other court physicians are planning to research the plague there. It has state-of-the-art facilities and is close to your apartments where Marianne works." She asked him, "Does that mean I have your permission?" Canach smiled and said, "You are the Empress. There is nothing you cannot have within the borders of this nation." She dazed and thought, "Nothing I cannot have." Canach gets confused seeing her and asked her, "Eusebia?" She nervously replied, "This really means a lot, Canach. I can't even imagine how Marianne would fare without your help." Canach said, "I was merely adding on to your suggestion." He holds her hand and said to her, "You should be giving the credit to yourself." She starts blushing. Eusebia said to Canach, "But yours is the better solution. Let's just say that we both did our parts." Canach, with a smile on his face, said to Eusebia, "That works." She, eating her food, thought, "I don't know why I can't stop being nervous. I should finish this plate quickly and excuse myself." Canach said, Eusebia?" He tells her about crumb on her face, saying, "There's a crumb on your cheek." She said, "Here?" He moves towards her, saying, "No, not there." He reached her cheek and removed the crumb with his hand. After removing the crumb, he said to her, "Here?" She thanks her for his help, saying, "Oh, thank you." She, seeing her closely, thought, She thought while blushing, seeing Canach so closely, "It's as if he's..." Canach said to her, "Eusebia." He, getting close to her, said, "Could it be?" Meanwhile, Oslin interrupts, shouting, "Your Majesty!" He was holding some documents and said, "I've been looking for you everywhere. You need to take a look at this document." He stops, noticing them. He, seeing them getting red, asked, "Am I interrupting something?" Canach, standing back, said, "Oslin, you never mind? You mentioned a document?" Meanwhile, she thought, "Just now. If I'm not mistaken." He was about to. Canach interrupts, saying, "I thoroughly enjoyed your company today." While leaving, he said to Eusebia, "We should do this again." She asked, "Of course." Meanwhile she thought, what should I do? Being around Canach gives me this strange feeling I can't explain. Changing scenes, we saw Marianne comes to Eusebia and said to her, am I understanding correctly, madam? My sister is to be treated at the palace hospital? Eusebia with a smile on her face replied, yes. Eusebia stand from her chair and said, the emperor has given his permission as well. All that remains is to make the preparations to bring her here. Marianne gets confused and asked, but the palace hospital is reserved for imperial family and ministers of the court. People like me are not worthy. Eusebia comes near to her and said, people like you? What makes you say that? Marianne said, I'm a commoner, madam. I consider myself incredibly fortunate that His Majesty granted me an opportunity to work in the palace. But in the other parts of the world, it would be considered taboo for a lowborn such as myself to even touch the hem of the Empress's robe. Eusebia said to her, much less receive treatment in the palace hospital. As far as I'm aware, Canach Riadon is ruled based on merit, not birth. She, holding Marianne's hands, said, and since you have been an outstanding servant of the imperial household, it's only fitting that you are rewarded for your work. Eusebia, holding her hands with a smile on her face, said to Marianne, besides, I would be a terrible empress were I to let myself and those in my service suffer because of pointless rules that help no one. Hearing this, Marianne gets shocked and said, Your Majesty. Eusebia said to her, just consider this a token of my friendship. I hope you'll not refuse it. Marianne remembers her sister's condition and recalls the moment when she was sitting with her crying and holding her hand. She said to Eusebia, to think, and then she starts crying while Eusebia was holding her hands. She, with tears on her face, said to Eusebia, that I allowed myself to be swayed against such a kind-hearted soul. Marianne kneeled down and said, I must beg your Majesty's forgiveness. Eusebia said, no, Marianne, this isn't. Marianne starts crying and interrupts her saying, the truth is, I was approached discreetly by a certain man the other day. She, hearing this, gets confused. Marianne said while crying, he asked me to spy on Madame in exchange for a cure for my sister, and I found myself wavering, if only for a moment. I deserve the harshest of punishments for my disloyalty. Eusebia hugs her and said to her, you deserve no such thing. You only wanted to help your sister. Eusebia said to Marianne, untested, loyalty is nothing. And you proved yours with remarkable fortitude even though your sister's life was at stake. Marianne said, but your Majesty. Eusebia said, I will hear no more. The only thing you need to tell me is the identity of this conspirator. Marianne, wiping her tears, said to Eusebia, the man who approached me with that offer. Marianne tells her about the man, saying, was one of the nobles who supported His Majesty against the tyrant. Baron Edwin is his name. Eusebia said, Edwin? I don't believe I've heard of him before. Why did he want you to spy on me? Marianne replied, that I don't know, madam. But judging from his past actions, there is little doubt that this is a snake of a man. He had gone into hiding after gravely insulting the previous emperor, and joined the revolution in a bid to turn the tables in his favor. That's how that pariah managed to return to court. Eusebia said, so he's not a true sympathizer but a cunning opportunist. Indeed. Baron Oslin, the revolution's greatest contributor, chose not to accept rewards to set an example and prevent other nobles from demanding titles. As a result, others such as Edwin who fought under His Majesty's banner failed to occupy higher positions within the court. They were compensated in land and gold, of course, but Baron Edwin squandered every single coin and now works among the rank and file of the imperial bureaucracy. Eusebia thought, Canach's revolution was aimed at dismantling the caste system enjoyed by the privileged. It's no wonder that the nobility would feel unhappy about it. Eusebia asked Marianne, but what could spying on me possibly accomplish? I'm not even his political enemy. Marianne replied, this is precisely why you must remain on guard, Your Majesty. His motives are unknown. Eusebia thought, Baron Edwin said, we, in the memory of the flower, which means there are others behind him. Eusebia asked Marianne, which fiefdom was Edwin rewarded with? Marianne replied, it was somewhere around the northeastern reaches of the empire. His domain borders the land of the non-human races and the kingdom of Rka to the north. Eusebia hearing this gets shocked. She thoughts remembering the necklace Dietrich gives her, his fiefdom borders Rka? Then the other conspirator must be. Eusebia remembers the necklace Dietrich gives her and she thoughts, how did I not realize it sooner? There's only one person in the world who'd go to such lengths to have me watched. She thoughts, Dietrich. He still hasn't let go of his suspicions about me. She clenched her hand while thinking about this. Seeing her, Marianne gets confused and said, Your Majesty. Eusebia said, Ah, yes. Thank you for sharing, Marianne. She replied, Always, madam. Marianne tells her something she should have to give attention about, saying, There is another thing I must bring to your Majesty's attention. With your permission, I would like to approach the Baron again as a double agent. Eusebia asked, A double agent, you say? Marianne said, I'm aware your Majesty does not intend to let this matter slide easily. An official investigation, however, will only alert the enemy and cover up any leads we might find about the mastermind. Marianne said, It is also too dangerous for you to act in person, Your Majesty. She said, That is where I may be assistance. I shall win the Baron's trust by accepting his offer and find out who's been giving the orders. Hearing this, Eusebia gets confused. She grabs Marianne's hand and said, This may put you in harm's way. Marianne replied, A risk I am prepared to bear. Marianne said, You have not only saved Edie's life, but also pardoned my disloyalty. 'Tis only because of your mercy that I have my life today, madam. It would be an honor to use it in your service. Marianne kneeled down and holding Eusebia's hand said to her, Please, do not deny me this chance. Eusebia experienced a sudden pang and said, Very well. Holding her hand she said, You have my thanks, Marianne. After some time Eusebia comes to garden. She founds the flower and turns towards it. She touches the flower and thought about Marianne's request. 'Tis only because of your mercy that I have my life today, madam. It would be an honor to use it in your service. She sitting in garden next to the flowers thought, an honor is it. Meanwhile someone steps in and said, Eusebia. She hearing this turns back and found Canach. She said, Canach? He said, You seem deep in thought. She said to him, The flowers are in full bloom everywhere I go. She touches a flower and said, This particular specimen requires constant care until it can blossom. The gardeners have clearly been putting in a lot of work. Canach said, I hadn't noticed, but they really are pretty. She points her finger to a flower. She said to Canach, Canach? I asked Marianne to bring her sister to the palace. She's overjoyed that she can now take proper care of the girl. And when I gave her my hands, she clasped them tightly, very tightly. I can't really explain why, but I was scared to realize that I had finally gained her full trust and loyalty. I wasn't sure I deserved it. I mean, I did next to nothing and… She seeing her hands said, I'm sorry. Perhaps I'm thinking too much. Canach said, Every morning I take this path to get to my office, but I never noticed how well these flowers were taken care of until today. He said, and I would have remained oblivious to the hard work of our gardeners if it weren't for you. Canach said, Same for Marianne's matter. I thought she was getting distracted from her duties lately, but I would never have bothered to look into her private life. He giving his hand to her said, It takes painful effort to put ourselves in other people's shoes and be aware of their needs. She holds her hand and Canach said, I'm very proud of you for dedicating yourself to this impossible task. You are a born leader, Eusebia. You have what it takes to rule a nation. He with a smile on his face thanks her saying, Thank you for coming to Riadon, and to me. Canach kissed her hand. She thought, Canach's kindness never fails to remind me of what I'm hiding from him. The infertility of guardians and the accord I have with my brother. So long as these fatal secrets remain sealed behind my lips, I would never be able to call myself the Empress of this nation. I may be living a life of deception, but I want to keep trying for those around me. She opens the drawer of her table to pull out the necklace. And thoughts, so I can guide and protect them just as Canach said. She holds the necklace in her hand and it starts shining. A voice comes from necklace saying, Eusebia? She said, It's been quite a while, brother. Dietrich said, You never sent word. I was starting to think that they might have killed you, but it seems you managed to keep the Emperor pleased somehow. Eusebia, sitting on her chair, said, I'm sorry for making you worry. Dietrich asked, So, how are you finding your new life in Riadon? She said, Not as bad as we thought. Meanwhile she thought, I shouldn't be putting too much burden on Marianne alone. I must do what I can to get more information. It will be less risky for her that way. For now, I need to see if it really was Dietrich who gave the orders to have me watched. I will butter him up if that's what it takes. She said, The Emperor does not give his trust easily. My options are limited at the moment. Dietrich asked, Is that so? Dietrich said, But he seems to have taken a liking to you, from what I hear. Eusebia stand from her chair and asked, What do you mean? Dietrich said, Did you really think I'd send my beloved sister alone to that foreign land? We have a friend within the Empire who works tirelessly to ensure your safety. Eusebia thought, as I suspected. Dietrich must have been the one pulling the strings behind Baron Edwin. She clenched the necklace and said, That's very reassuring to hear, brother. Might I have the name of this ally you speak of? It would help greatly to know who's on my side. Dietrich replied, No need to concern yourself with such things. You need only do as you are told. He said, The world of politics is no less dangerous than a battlefield for a woman. Listen to your brother, and all will be well. He said, But if you insist on helping, there is the small matter of the Emperor's recent tax reform proposal. The reform would radically disrupt the status quo for the nobility. Yet strangely enough, those of old money among the aristocracy seem to be supporting it. Perhaps you can investigate what underhanded tricks the Emperor has employed to rally them to his cause. We need to start sowing the seeds of discord between him and the nobility, if we are to bring Riadon to its heel. Eusebia gets confused and shocked. She said, But these are the same people who joined the Emperor's revolution. There's no guarantee that we can shake their support. If we act rashly, our people will be the ones to pay the price. Dietrich said, A hasty assumption, dear sister. She replied, Dietrich, I'm only worried for RKA. Dietrich clenched the necklace and said to her, Well, if it troubles you so, why don't you bring me your husband's weakness instead of letting your imagination run wild? Make use of what you have between your legs if you must. She gets completely shocked hearing this. Dietrich said, I hope your loyalty to RKA is still burning bright within you. Oh, and don't be stranger. He clenched the necklace and said, Dear sister. He slams his hands on the table and said, Damn it, curse it all. He smirks and said, That imbecile dares talk back to me? He clenched the necklace and she said, Dietrich, I'm only worried for RKA. Dietrich said in his mind, Are you now? Nonsense. All you want is to make your bed in a world where you are hailed a hero. That's why you were so eager to accept the savage's degrading marriage offer. He shouts in anger, A fight to the death is what you ought to have elected if you truly cared for your people. He said, There's no loyalty? Traitors everywhere, parasites who would rather see this kingdom fall. He sitting on his chair thought, Eusebia, my dear sister, you could not possibly imagine the things I had to do to protect this nation. I was only 14 when I started ruling as a regent in the name of our pathetic father who chose to neglect his crown and subjects after our mother died. A boy regent with only a weak and ailing king to support him at court could not command the loyalty of his vassals. Eusebia said, Dietrich. She clutched his shirt and said, Dietrich, I miss mother. Her eyes were full of tears. Dietrich thought, But even then I vowed to dedicate my life to protecting our family and kingdom, no matter the cost. I was prepared to give every last drop of blood in me to this sacred calling. Until he recalls the moment when Eusebia was awakened. Someone said, The princess has awakened. RKA has a guardian now. He was standing at door while someone said, at long last, after centuries of waiting, the Arjun Wood has not forsaken us. It's rather baffling that the crown prince was not chosen. A man said, it's probably a sign that Dietrich is unfit to rule. The goddess wishes to see Eusebia crowned instead. Hearing this, Dietrich gets shocked while standing at the door. Then he recalls the moment when he visited Eusebia after she was awakened. Eusebia said to her, I'm sorry, Dietrich. She said, I still feel sick. I'm not at my best at the moment, you understand, don't you? He smirks and said, of course. You must be exhausted. He said, until you betrayed me. Dietrich, standing behind the window, thought, Eusebia, you are the guardian of RKA, and yet you have not done a single thing to bring true progress to this stagnant nation. All you did was erect a wall around us to keep us caged in this dying land. These other fools are too blind to see that, with their incessant cries to put you on the throne. He places his hand on the window and said, see what RKA has become because of you. Meanwhile, someone steps in saying, the moment draws near, Your Highness. A man wearing a black dress enters and said to him, soon, the foul-blooded savage will be dragged before you, bound and humiliated, and you, Majesty, shall be the hand of justice that delivers his death. He said, all the continent shall kneel and swear fealty at your feet. Dietrich said, yes, very soon. He taunts, RKA must be rebuilt from the very foundations if she is to prosper. What his nation requires is not a guardian, but an ambition to see us rise as lords of this continent. And I. He looks out from the window and thought, I will be the one to make it happen. Marianne asked to Eusebia, you wish to see the members of the Imperial Diet, Your Majesty? She replied, yes. I wish to get acquainted with the structure of government and division of power in the empire. She said, the Diet has 20 members in total, correct? Marianne said, yes, madam. 10 lords of the realm and 10 commoner representatives. To pass a bill, 13 or more votes in favor are required. Eusebia thinks, an equal weight of nobles and commoners. The debates must be intense whenever new bills are proposed. And I can't imagine what political machinations take place behind closed doors. No one else should be more well informed about the situation within Riadon than the members of the Imperial Diet. Dietrich knew about the tax reform bill for quite some time. And a low-ranking official like Edwin couldn't have gotten his hands on any documents to give to Dietrich. When the bill has yet to even be implemented, there must be someone else among the Diet members. Who's cooperating with my brother? Eusebia asked her, if I were to arrange a meeting with the lords of the Diet, would it seem too political? Marianne, with a smile on her face, replied, from what I hear, the wives of the Diet members organize regular tea gatherings to foster friendship. She whispered in her ear, perhaps Your Majesty could invite these ladies for tea in a similar fashion. It would be the perfect excuse. Eusebia asked her, to get information without drawing suspicion. She said, thank you, Marianne, for your excellent advice. Marianne bowed and said, I will make the necessary preparations then. She asked, do you have a preferred venue in mind, Your Majesty? Eusebia replied, well, since it's a tea party, somewhere with a remarkable view. After some time, some ladies arrived at Manor, and Marianne said to them, welcome to the Manor. The Empress awaits your ladyships further inside. Please follow me. A lady said, look at this place. I've never seen a garden this beautiful before. A lady said, there are all those rumors of an arranged marriage with a princess of a provincial kingdom. Other lady next to her said, yes, but it seems the emperor has found the apple of his eye. Now I'm curious what she's like. Meanwhile, Eusebia comes and said, welcome, ladies. Hearing her voice, the lady starts sweating. Eusebia, wearing an elegant green dress, said, it's good to finally meet you all in person. At the table full of sweets, ladies asked Eusebia, the gardens are very beautiful, madam. They really are. Is it true that the emperor built this place just for you? A lady said, how thoughtful of His Majesty. Meanwhile, Duchess Evelyn Hale, seeing them, thinks, So these are the wives of the most powerful men in the empire. And the woman who commands the most influence out of them all is? Evelyn said, with such an attentive husband, the palace should feel like home for you by now, your majesty. Eusebia thinks, the lady of House Hale. A royalist family that produced many queen consorts throughout the reign of the Fernan dynasty. But also the first among the old nobility to openly support Canach's revolution. Everyone sitting here is an accomplished player of the game, who has managed to survive and prosper even as the revolution redefines social order in the empire. How I speak and behave in their presence today will open the doors I need to enter the political sphere of Riadon. Noticing a lady, she thinks, that lady at the end doesn't seem too keen on mingling with the others. Marianne said she was Oslin's little sister, Linbara Brush. Marchioness Linbara Brush. Something about her reminds me of who I used to be. Eusebia asked her, Lady Brush? You seem to be enjoying your tea very much. Do you like it? Brush gets confused and said, Oh, why yes. She said, I've never had this tea before. WWE have a tea plantation too, and a lady said, Linbara, dear, you realize we're in Her Majesty's presence. Evelyn said, the poor dear means no disrespect, madam. She rarely speaks at these gatherings, and when she does, she tends to struggle. Hearing this, she gets sad and flushed. Two ladies said, did she just say tea plantation? Everyone knows how cold the lands of House Brush are. Nothing grows there save for a handful of gnarly trees. Evelyn said, Your Majesty, that reminds me you are also from the north, yes? Riadon's northern region is far too cold to grow crops, and life is often hard for people there. I imagine it's the same story for peasants under House Brush. She said, What about RKA, Your Majesty? Are things any different in your homeland? Hearing this, Eusebia thinks, a test. They're openly mocking the sister of a newly ennobled aristocrat in my presence. This is their way of forcing me to choose a side between the old nobility and the new aristocracy. And there's no telling who among them answers to Dietrich. I know what I must choose to move forward with my plan, but is it really the right thing to do? I'm not sure if I'm making the right choice. It would be so much simpler if I could just use my magic. Pathetic. Pathetic, Eusebia. Meanwhile, she feels Canach's presence, Eusebia. She thinks, no, the choice is already made. I already made up my mind that night when I decided to keep trying. Eusebia said, You're right. The north is a frozen wasteland, and life is never easy there. Evelyn said, Your Majesty. I knew you would agree. Meanwhile, Eusebia interrupts her saying, However, there are many who still call the north their home, and I believe home is wherever we are. I am thrilled, my dear Duchess, that the ladies of the court know so much about life in the far north. It speaks volumes about your compassion for northerners. She said, and seeing your concern for the small folk of other estates convinces me that you are all taking good care of your subjects. Evelyn said, Pardon me, Your Majesty, but I'm not sure I understand. Eusebia said, Oh, I only meant what I said. She asked, We had a cold winter, did we not? I am concerned about how the people are faring in your estates. A lady said, Winter is less taxing here, madam. The goddess has showered the south with her blessing. Eusebia asked, Is that so? She said, From what I hear, last autumn, harvests were greatly hurt by the drought. I've heard the record's emergency grains were distributed to those in need. The blessing of the goddess is still too far out of reach for some of us who have to survive the winter with precious little in our pockets. Nobody is immune to starvation. It can happen anywhere, north and south. We must keep our eyes and ears open so we may reach out to those too weak to even cry out for help. Well, was I collective in assuming that we're all taking good care of our citizens? I wonder why everyone's so shy this afternoon. What about you, Lady Brush? Perhaps you want to share how you people fared last winter. Brush replied, Yes, madam. The land of the Brush estate gets frozen solid in winter, and harvest is impossible. The emperor grants provisions every year, which we save up for the harshest winters. We pay our liege taxes in wood, so we have our farmers collect the lumber, and pay them the money they need to last through winter. My husband and I often tighten our purses to buy more food for the people. Eusebius said, You empty your own coffers to feed the peasants? Truly your selflessness may be the only thing that keeps your people warm through the harsh northern winter. Evelyn asked, What answers? She asked, Do you wish to hear from us, madam? Eusebius replied, You heard me, my dear Duchess. Is to know how your people fared last winter. Eusebius said, Actually, I had a look at your trade records before coming here. They showed a shocking amount of iron ore purchases, made by Houses Hill and Gautier, which were then transported into your estates. Now the Brush is used. Private funds to keep their peasants fed and clothed through the cold. What about you, HM? What were those iron ores purchased for? What could your blacksmiths have been making without the Emperor's knowledge? Hearing her words, Evelyn raised, shouting, Your Majesty! Are you accusing us of treason? Lady Gautier said, It's not what it looks like, madam. Allow me to explain. Evelyn shouts, Lady Gautier. Lady Gautier said, A mithril mine that previously belonged to the crown is scheduled for auction. Evelyn and I merely sought to acquire it. They used the iron ores to build the mining facilities. Hearing this, Eusebius thinks, a mithril mine. Eusebius thinks, Canach must have agreed to hand the property over to the nobility, in return for their votes in the Diet. So this is how he keeps the old atrocities placated. Evelyn said, Your Majesty may not hold us in favor, but we, too, joined the current emperor's banner when he rose up against the tyrant. She said, It truly is regrettable, madam. To think we risk our lives for this nation only to be awarded with this disdain. She said, I beg your Majesty's forgiveness, but we must take our leave for today. After a week, Eusebius sitting in her workplace thinks, It's already been a week. Yet not a single letter has arrived from the ladies. I've made myself a thorn in their sides now, haven't I? I'm starting to think I should have tried to win them over instead. But still, meanwhile Oslin knocks the door saying, Your Majesty. He asked, May I enter? Eusebius asked him, Lord Vaynar? What brings you here? He replied, Something for you, madam. He gives her a small bag and a letter saying, These are from my sister. She asked, From Lady Brush? Oslin said, I heard how are you. Stood up for her at the tea party, Your Majesty. Lynbera was only 10 when she got the fever. It left her speech permanently impaired. She prefers to isolate herself in the estate because of this. I believe this is the first time she's ever written to someone outside of the family. She opens the bag and asked, What's this? He replied, A unique species of tea found only in the lands of House Brush, madam. It's smaller compared to other teal trees, but its tiny leaves endure through winter to acquire an aroma unlike any other. He said, I've had very few chances to try it myself. It's quite hard to come by even where it grows. I can really see the thought that went into that gift. Well, suffice to say, she is a far better judge of character than her pig-headed brother. He bowed and said, I am infinitely grateful for the kindness your Majesty has shown us. And we will never forget it. Eusebius said, Lord Vaynar. She recalls Canach's words, You are a born leader, Eusebius. You have what it takes to rule a nation. Seeing the species thinks, You're right, Canach. I was able to help others, without resorting to magic. She said, A thoughtful gift indeed. Lady Brush is too kind. I can't wait to try it. In the next scene, Eusebius said to Canach, Here, Canach, I thought you might want to try Lynbera's tea. He said, I'm glad your tea party with the ladies went well. She said, Yes, it was worth the trouble. I was able to befriend Lynbera and her brother. She said, Lord Oslin has been very kind to me lately. Hearing this, he asked, Oslin? He asked, Since when did you start calling him that? You used to refer to him as Lord Vaynar. She replied, Well, he said. She recalls Aslan's words, "You are the empire's, madam, and I a mere vassal. 'Tis only right that your majesty addresses me by name instead of title." She said, "And I thought he disliked me." "Life is full of surprises indeed." He said, "You seem pleased." Eusebia with a smile said, "Overjoyed in fact, you wanted me to get on better terms with your inner circle, and I accomplished just that." He said, "You have a way of bringing out my petty side sometimes." She asked him, "So what are we talking about?" He replied, "Never mind." He said, "Let me know if I'm taking too much of your time." He said, "The girl arrives today, doesn't she?" She claps and said, "Ah, yes. Today is the big day. Edie's his family moving into the palace." Eusebia went to see Edie's and said, "Edie's, welcome." She bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I'm honored." Eusebia said, "You must be tired after the journey." Seeing Marianne, she gets happy and rushed towards her and hugged her. Edie's said, "Not at all." Marianne said, "She is feeling a lot better thanks to the medicine your Majesty sent us." Eusebia said, "Wonderful. You will be back to full health soon enough. The court physicians will see to that." She, moving her hand towards Edie, said, "I'm so pleased to meet you, Edie's. I'm sure we'll be good friends." Meanwhile, Eusebia thinks, it's heartbreaking to think that a girl so young had to go through so much suffering. Edie shakes hand with Eusebia. Suddenly Eusebia felt something off and thinks, "What is this feeling?" Meanwhile Simon comes shouting, "Your Majesty!" He said, "I humbly beg your Majesty's forgiveness. I hope I did not keep you waiting for too long." Seeing him, she said, "Simon." She said, "That's all right, we've only just arrived ourselves." She thinks, probably a dizzy spell. She introduced Edie's and Simon to each other, saying, "This is Edie's, Marianne's sister." Edie said to him, "Hello?" Simon said, "Oh, a pleasure." Simon turned, saying, "Shall we take a look around the hospital then?" Eusebia thinks, I expected them to become a fast friends since they're of similar age, but it seems they need more time. Simon said, "The palace hospital is reserved for use by the imperial family and court officials, so it has fewer wards compared to other hospitals. Instead, we choose to focus spare resources on the research of pathology and medicine." Hearing this, Edie said, "Wow." Simon said, "This is the chamber where we study the rigor. We haven't had the time to clean up. I beg Madam's pardon for the mess." Eusebia said, "Well, if anything, it shows how busy our physicians have been. I'm proud of you all." She picked some reports and asked, "Are these research materials on the rigor?" He replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. The Gilead Trading Guild is the sole maker and distributor of the medicine for the rigor, and they have near absolute control over prices. To counter this by developing formulas on our own, but when we looked into the ingredients used for the medicine, we discovered that the compounds were not at all but we expected, likely due to magical alteration. We hit a dead end with the research because none of us had much knowledge about magic. Presently, we plan to turn our course toward medicine that does not involve magic." Eusebia interrupts him, saying, "I can help if magic's the problem." She grabs his hand, saying, "What did you say, Simon? We'd make excellent partners in crime, don't you think?" After some time, Canach asked to Eusebia while sitting in their room, "You wish to work with Simon for the cure?" She clutched her claws, saying, "That's right." Meanwhile she thinks, "My magic has weakened since I left RKA, but making some medicine shouldn't be too demanding. This is the perfect chance to strengthen my position as Empress. I want to help by doing what I'm good at. And I know Canach will support me." She asked him, "Well, do you not think it a splendid plan?" Seeing him, she thinks, he doesn't look too pleased. Canach sighed and said, "Eusebia, no. I'm sure you have your reasons. But I'm afraid I cannot give you permission this time." Hearing this, she asked, "Why not?" She clenched her hand, saying, "Simon and I are prepared to fully commit ourselves to the research. This can help the afflicted." Canach replied, "If you're here to discuss the cure for the rigor, you must have been told about the Gilead Trading Guild already. He said, Gilead is the most influential organization of merchants in the continent, and the majority of trade involving non-human races happens through them. Even I don't know how deeply entrenched their power is. Making enemies out of those who control the flow of gold in the realm is ill-advised. Also, their rigor cure is currently one of their flagship products. They won't take kindly to intervention. She said, I'm aware of the risks, Canach. But we cannot just sit and watch when so many are dying in agony out there. You can't ask me to turn a blind eye on them. Hearing this, he said, the court officials are in the middle of finding a solution. You need not trouble yourself with this matter. Eusebia raised from her chair, saying, I thought you wanted me to find a way to help. She said, You said you were glad to have me in Riadon? You said I'm a born leader. He replied, Yes, but that's irrelevant. She asked, Irrelevant? How? He replied, I want you to surround yourself with pleasant things. Good things. Why expose yourself to danger when you can lead a life of comfort in the palace? She asked him, Are you telling me to shut myself in that dollhouse, wasting time on tea and cake like some spoiled little princess? Eusebia shouts, I didn't come here to be your puppet. Suddenly she realized her behavior and said, I'm sorry, Canach, I didn't mean to. He comes close to her and said, Eusebia. She starts sweating and thinks he seems upset. She clutched her cloths and thinks, I messed up again. I overstepped my bounds by raising my voice to the emperor. I forgot that it's not my place to interfere in matters of state. I am less than nothing here. Yet I allowed myself to become proud just because he treated me well. She said, I humbly beg your majesty's forgiveness. She said, It was not my intention to challenge your authority. He asked, What? He said, No, Eusebia. You misunderstand. I didn't mean to frighten you. He holds her shoulder. She said, Biba, Canach said I should apologize. He said, I'm sorry. I know how important this is to you. Meanwhile, she gets confused and thinks this isn't anger. It feels more like fear. She asked, What troubles you so, Canach? He replied, I'm scared. I'm scared that I might once again fail to protect the person I deeply care for. And I can't stop thinking about it. He sit on his knees saying, So please, Eusebia, let me protect you, she said, Canach. Meanwhile she thinks, once again fail. She said, You seem to feel very strongly about this. If there's something from your past that still weighs on your mind, you can always share. Meanwhile he suddenly raised. She asked, Canach? He said, We should talk later. He rushed towards the door and she shouts, Canach. Next morning she thinks, he didn't come back all night. He mentioned losing someone he deeply cared for. I wonder who that is. Meanwhile Marianne comes and said, Good morning, your majesty. She brings some flowers and said, I see you have awoken early. She said, I was just about to change the flowers in the vase. Eusebia said, Good idea. I'm feeling somewhat down this morning. By the way, Marianne, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Are you the one who picks the flowers out? Marianne said, No, madam. The flowers are always handpicked by His Majesty. She said, They are then delivered to me every morning to ensure that they stay fresh for madam to enjoy. She thinks, then all those flowers were from him too. She recalls a moment when Canach asked her, Are those your favorite? She replied, I like my flowers small and dainty. Especially when they come in a variety of colors. Meanwhile she thinks, Canach is not a bad person. That much is beyond doubt. But I still. Next day she went to garden to see flowers. She recalls Marianne's world. The weather is lovely today, madam. Perhaps you would enjoy a brief stroll in the gardens before sundown? Seeing the flowers she thinks, I ended up making Marianne worry needlessly. She thinks, but still. I shouldn't stay here. All these flowers are filling my head with silly thoughts. Meanwhile she hears some voice and turns thinking, Where's that sound coming from? She thinks, Is there someone here? A white-haired guy named Jasker was sleeping there. Seeing him, she gets confused. She thinks, who's this? She comes close thinking, I don't think I've seen this man around. He's wearing a soldier's uniform. How did he wind up here? She turns thinking, I should call the guards, just in case. Suddenly Jasker wakes up and she turns back. Seeing him, she said, oh? He also gets confused first and said, eh? Then he suddenly shouts, help. Eusebia said, I'm the one who should be calling for help. He starts laughing and said, I should have recognized the empire of the sun's new empress. He said, please pardon my discourtesy. I must have dozed off. She thinks, what on earth is this man doing here? She asked him, your rank and name, sir? He replied, oh, I'm not really with the army. He said, but I'd be honored to introduce myself to the Empress. Jaxer, at your service. She said, Jaxer? Suddenly she shouts, Jaxer? The Jaxer? He, pointing his finger towards him, asked, Madam knows me? She thinks, but of course. If Aslan is Canach's left hand, his friend Jaxer is his right. He was also a former slave soldier like Canach. And thanks to his martial prowess, he quickly rose through the ranks to become the commander of the Imperial Army. She said, you lied to me? You're the commander of the Imperial Army. He said, so I am known to the Empress. He said, but as I said, I'm not with the army. Not anymore. She gets shocked hearing this and asked, what? He said, I handed in my letter of resignation. I've grown weary of military life, you see. This handsome face of mine will no longer be wasted on the battlefield. I fly now toward freedom. Besides, I can no longer keep up with His Majesty's demanding standards. I don't intend on working myself into an early grave. She said, he can be quite stern when it comes to duties, but he's the sweetest man I know. He asked, is that what Madam thinks? He said, that sounds far from the Emperor I know. Very far, in fact. He said, I assure you, there is no need to mask your true feelings. You may talk freely. She asked, what do you mean? He said, with all due respect, madam. Wouldn't you say this marriage alliance of yours is a degrading arrangement for Arcaye? His Majesty is not exactly known for his pleasant demeanor. If anything, he's the sort of man who provokes fear in those around him. It's rather obvious to me that you've experienced this firsthand. Hearing his words, she shouts, Jaxer. She asked him, why do you speak about him that way? Are you not His Majesty's close friend? He laughed and replied, he's certainly put himself in a good light for you, it seems. He asked, or did he threaten you to silence? He said, I'm simply concerned is all. Being likable is not exactly His Majesty's strong suit. Eusebia said, you overstep. I will not have you insult my husband in my presence. Your baseless accusations need to stop now. He smiled and asked, baseless? He turned saying, I've known the Emperor since childhood. She said, then you've never truly known him. He asked him, is that so? She replied, yes. I couldn't ask for a better husband. His Majesty has been nothing but kind to me. And he has my utmost respect and affection. Jasker said, how touching to know that the Empress finds such fulfillment in her marital life. She said, I am warning you, sir. Meanwhile, Canach was standing beside her and Jasker asked, wouldn't you agree, Your Majesty? Hearing this, she gets shocked. She flushed and turns back. Seeing him, she asked, Canach? And he blushed and starts sweating at same time, because he heard the whole thing. She said, Canach? How long have you been there? He replied, I came to check on you when I heard Jaxer was headed this way, and... Jasker said, oh, does my meeting with the Empress scare the husband that much? He runs away saying, well, that's it from me. Good day, Your Majesties. Meanwhile, she thinks, so he was just egging me on knowing that Canach was here? He said, Eusebia, there's something I'd like to discuss. She turns and he asks, do you have a moment to spare? Canach asked her while sitting in their room, were you able to get some sleep? She clenched her hand and replied, "No." She asked, "How could I after you stormed out like that?" She said, "You never came back last night. And I was worried you'd never want to see me again." She said, "I can see I've upset you very much." He said, "Eusebia, the fault is mine, not yours." He grabs her hand and said, "It was never my intention to threaten you or limit your freedom. But I knew there was nothing I could do if you ended up fearing or hating me for it. So when I saw the harm I'd caused, there was little else I could do, save for running away like a coward." She asked, "Why would I hate you, Canach?" She holds her hand and said, "I admit, I was taken back by our argument last night, but I don't doubt that you genuinely wish to protect me." She said, "That's all I needed to know." She smiled and said, "I trust you, Canach." He starts blushing and said, "Eusebia." She said, "Oh, and I forgot to thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful." He sighed and said, "It's not much of a gift." She said, "It's gift enough for me." He put his hand in his pocket saying, "I have a more fitting present here with me." He said, "Try squeezing this in your hand." She asked, "What is it?" She touches it and a magical aura appears and she gets surprised. She gets happy and said, "A magical artifact." He asked, "Do you like it?" She replied, "Of course. It's gorgeous. It couldn't have been easy to come by." Canach said, "I had one procured from the dwarves who trade with us. Your smile tells me I made the right choice." Eusebia said, "Thank you for this. I don't think I'll ever forget this day." He said, "I hope you didn't find that off-putting." He touches her lips and said, "You must let me know if being this close to me makes you uncomfortable." She replied, "Not at all. He gets close to her asking, "Then may I continue?" He said, "I've been longing to kiss you." She asked, "Are you asking for my permission?" She said, "It's just all so sudden. I don't know what to say." She said, "But I don't dislike it." Then they both kissed each other. She recalls the moment when he said to her, "I, too, haven't been intimate with anyone else." She thinks, "I thought he was inexperienced." He said, "You need to breathe through your nose." She said, "It's hard to be aware of my breathing in the middle of all that." He said, "Then we probably need more practice in this area too." She gets confused and asked, "Practice?" He kissed her again saying, "Yes. You were shy to share a bed with me at first, but now you're used to it. It'll be the same." He asked her, "Was that so bad?" She replied, "No." He asked, "Shall we?" She starts blushing and sweating and asked, "Eh?" He kissed her again and she said, "Wait, let me catch my breath first." Meanwhile Eusebia said, "The lights are fading." Canach replied, "It's a scroll-based magic, so it doesn't last very long." Eusebia said, "You wasted a magic scroll just to let me try it out." Canach said, "It doesn't matter." He kissed her saying, "Seeing your smile is worth more than any expensive magic." He said, "For the longest time, I thought that, if I were to marry," he said, "I would make my wife the happiest woman in the world." He said, "Being wed, having a family, those things were an unimaginable luxury for a slave like me." Eusebia thinks, "I see. I only saw this union as a political arrangement between two nations, though Canach has been doing his best to turn it into something real. He's been so kind and honest to me all this time. Yet I've answered his goodwill with deception and anger." She said, "I'm sorry. I know it's for my sake that you're reluctant to allow the cure development. I think I know what you fear. I know how terrible it is to have to watch loved ones killed before our eyes. But that is precisely why we need to develop a cure of our own, Canach. Too many have lost their friends and families to the rigor. Someone has to put an end to it." Canach said, "Then I have no way to stop you. Your strength always manages to surprise me. Besides, I'm already well aware of the sort of person you are. You'll never give up once you set your mind to something. I only hope that you won't neglect your own safety while you do it." Meanwhile Eusebia thinks, "Safety." Suddenly she smiled and said, "I have an idea." We should distribute the cure through a discreet channel. Canach asked. Discreet channel? Eusebius said yes. We can make an anonymous trading guild. It may not help improve our standing immediately since it'll be operating in secret, she said, but at least we'll be able to ensure the safety of those who buy and sell the cure. Provided Simon and I have your permission to develop one. Of course. Canach asked, is my permission the only thing stopping you? She asked, what do you? Canach sighed and said, how exactly did I come across in the beginning that you would seek my permission for this? He said, if I had known how happy this would make you, I would have. He stands saying, I'll think of a way to protect you and your research, Eusebius said, holding his shirt. Does that mean you're giving your permission? She asked him, will you be sleeping in our bedchamber tonight? Hearing this, he starts blushing. Canach asked her, are you lonely, Eusebia? She said, I'm new here, and I'm yet to be acquainted with the others. She holds her hand, saying, until then. She said, I'll need you by my side. Canach said, of course. He said, I will always be with you. He, thinking about her previous life, said to her, no matter what. I swear it. Canach said, there's an underground tunnel? Eusebia asked, below this room? He replied, that's right. They serve as escape routes during emergencies. He said, there are 16 tunnels in total throughout the palace. Eusebius said, how do I find one? I don't recall seeing any suspicious-looking doorknobs. Canach said, of course not. They're hidden from sight. Come here. He, showing her a statue, said, this is the switch. Eusebia gets surprised and asked, a statuette? He said, remember, third one from the left? Just press the button and... He pressed it, and a door opens to the underground tunnel. Seeing the tunnel, she gets shocked and thinks, incredible. Canach asked her, shall we? She gets confused. He, with a smile on his face, said, Your Majesty? They went down holding each other's hands, and Canach said, watch your step. He said, the hall isn't fully furnished yet. Meanwhile, seeing the place, she gets surprised and flushed. He said, but it has everything you might need for your research. Eusebius said, I never knew there was a place like this in the palace. It feels like magic. Canach said, nothing compared to the magic you're about to show us. Developing a cure for the rigor, now that's a feat no one has dared to brave. Eusebius smiled and said, it was Simon's idea. I only stepped in later. She said, he'll want to see this too? We need him to start the research. Meanwhile, Oslin and Simon both come shouting, Here, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. She asked Simon, Lord Oslin? What brings you here? Oslin replied, Well, madam, I was responsible for the construction of this tunnel. He said, truth be told, when His Majesty first requested it, I did not see the point of a safe house in this part of the palace. Oslin said, but now I see who it was for all along. Got a problem with that? Canach said, got a problem with that? He said, I had a look at the research plans. This seems to be quite a massive undertaking, which, I believe, may benefit from my participation. Eusebius said, Lord Oslin. Simon said, he's been kind enough to sort out the patient information. Oslin said, I could only identify the patients who had been in the temple's care to begin with. Simon said, a huge undertaking nonetheless. He said, we need to group these people according to shared symptoms. Age and sex, next. Meanwhile, Eusebius said, my gratitude to the both of you. Hearing this, they both gets confused. Eusebia thinks, Lord Oslin used to be so wary of me when we first met. Is there anything I can assist you with, Your Majesty? But now he's really making an effort to support my cause. I have to make this count. I won't take his kindness for granted. Meanwhile, Eusebia ties her hair, saying, shall we get to work then? Simon said there's still some paperwork left. Simon said, please, leave such menial tasks to us, Your Majesty. Oslin asked, pardon my asking, but does Your Majesty know how to catalog documents? Eusebia replied, I can learn. Canach said, best leave it to them, Eusebia. 1 week later, Eusebia went to Simon and asked, Simon? She asked, any progress? Simon replied, I humbly beg your forgiveness, madam, but there's nothing here of note. He said, every case of the rigor occurred suddenly without any telling symptoms. Even the incubation period is inconsistent across records. He said there doesn't seem to be any particularly vulnerable age group or location. Meanwhile, Eusebia thinks, we've been at work for days now without finding anything useful. The lack of progress is taking a toll on all of us. There has to be a clue here somewhere. Anything would help at this point. Writing something, she thinks, anything. Meanwhile, she drops the ink on paper and Marianne shouts, Madam! She said, I will bring something to clean the papers. Eusebia said, I'm sorry. I didn't notice. Marianne said, please, allow me to take care of it. Your Majesty has been working without rest. Eusebia said, this is my duty, Marianne. I must see it done. Meanwhile, she thinks, I can't give up now. I am the only one who can. Meanwhile, Marianne interrupts saying, some tea then, madam? She said, just a quick break. While I refill the inkwell for you. Eusebia said, holding a cup of tea, I haven't had Lindbergh's tea in quite a while. She said, what a soothing scent. Marianne said, one step at a time, Your Majesty. Marianne said, the previous royal house, House Vernon, was content to watch the masses ravaged by the rigor without attempting to remedy the situation. She said, for years, the afflicted had no choice but to wait for death until Your Majesty came to Riadon. She, holding Eusebia's hand, said, just knowing that someone is taking the step to help us and our families gives us the strength to go on. Meanwhile, Eusebia starts blushing and said, oh, Marianne. She said, the feeling is mutual. Life here would be unbearable without you. Marianne said, no, Your Majesty. I must do better. She said, I should have prepared this tea using the water of the Fihar. Eusebia asked her, you mean the river? She replied, yes. It is proof of the goddess's blessing upon this nation. All the waterways of Riadon converge on the Fihar. The crystal clear water of the upper Fihar is considered perfect for tea. Eusebia asked her, are you speaking from experience? Marianne said, indeed, Your Majesty. I grew up in a riverside village by the upper Fihar. People there drink straight from the river. It is really that clean. Eusebia said, fascinating. Arcaea has no major rivers like the Fihar. How long were you in that charming place? Eusebia gets shocked when she said, I left when I was 14, madam. She said, I had to work in the capital to keep my family fed. Edith came to live with me after our parents died. She had the rigor and needed someone to take care of her. Eusebia thinks Marianne hasn't caught the disease even though they've been living under the same roof. Edith came to the capital after getting the rigor. Prior to that, she lived alone for years in that riverside village by the Fihar. Suddenly Eusebia thinks the great river that carries its water to every corner of the realm. She gets shocked and scared while thinking, could it be? Is the Fihar River the cause of the plague? Canach asked her, you wish to investigate the river? Eusebia, holding some papers, replied, I should have picked it up earlier. The rigor has spread throughout the realm. But some areas haven't been hit as hard. These regions have flourished recently thanks to the mines. Canach said, yes, and? She replied, the Fihar doesn't go through these lands? Hearing this, Canach paused. Eusebia said the patients from these locations were all migrants who came for employment. She said the rigor might be a waterborne disease. They went to the river and a rose seller comes and said, sir, ma'am. Giving a rose to her, he asked, care to buy a flower? He said this rose was given the waters of the Fihar. It carries the blessing of the goddess. A perfect gift for newlyweds. Hearing this, they both gets confused and asked, newlyweds? The seller boy said, oh, I'm sorry, I thought. Meanwhile, Eusebia grabs the rose from his hand saying, don't be. She smiled and said, you guessed right. She said, we're on our honeymoon. Eusebia, holding Canach's arm, said, I was nervous because this was my first undercover inspection. But it seems our disguises were effective. Nobody has recognized us so far. She, noticing Canach, asked him, "Canach, are you all right?" Canach replied, "I can't say I'm used to this. Dressing up in broad daylight." He said, "These things are usually done under the cover of the night." She interrupts him, saying, "That sounds exciting." Canach said, "No, you may not leave the palace at night." He said, "Even in these peaceful times, you never know where danger could be lurking. It's only because of your research that we ventured out this far in the first place." Eusebius said, "I didn't know you were so worried. You gave your permission so readily." Canach said, "I had my doubts when you said you wanted to visit the river." He said, "But I decided to follow your advice in the end. You're quickly becoming the leading authority on the rigor. Simon and Aslan are most impressed by your insights as well." Eusebius starts blushing and said, "You flatter me." Canach said, "I mean it. You're a natural-born stateswoman with an elegance to match. It's becoming a real problem. No disguise can hide it from shining through." Eusebius said, "Surely not. There's nothing special about me." Canach asked her, "Who told you that?" Canach said, "Even now." He hugs her and kissed her, saying, "I can't stop admiring how beautiful you are." Eusebius said, "Canach, we may have work to do." He said, "I know." Canach whispers in her ear, "I'll go get a sample of the water." She whispered, "Thank you. I'll ask around and try to collect some information." Canach said, "Signal the man in blue over there should you encounter any problem." She asked, "Man in blue?" Eusebius, noticing Jaxer, said, "You mean Commander Jaxer?" Canach sighed and replied, "No longer a commander. Just a retired soldier who does my bidding for a living." While leaving, Canach said, "I won't be long." Eusebius, waving her hand, said, "I'll be waiting." Meanwhile, Eusebius thinks, "I'm glad he gave me his leave despite his concerns. Things would have been much harder without his permission." All leads point to the river, but we still can't be certain that the water is the cause. Not everyone who drank from the river came down with the rigor. The nearby plants may know something. Meanwhile, she touches a flower and it shouts, "Help us! Something in the river, the water!" Hearing this, she gets shocked and thinks, "What's the matter? Calm down and talk to me. What's got you so frightened?" The flower said, "Here is our memory of that day." The flower shows his memory to her and shouts, "Help us! Save us!" She, seeing a guy doing magic on water, thinks, "Who on earth? What is that person doing?" Something feels off. This sense of dread feels all too familiar. She thinks, "I know this magic. It's the same presence that killed me in my previous life." She felt down, thinking, "How is it that I'm feeling the same magical signature from the water? The sorcerer working with Ruther Shoen B in RKA. Could he be the culprit who cursed the river? If all of this is a plot hatched by Dietrich." Meanwhile, her hat blows in air and she said, "No. Countless innocent citizens are in danger." She thinks, could Dietrich really be the one behind the corruption of the river? What could he possibly want? If the sorcerer in his service is powerful enough to curse a river of this size, surely they could have waged war outright had that been their purpose. But instead, they chose to wait for the plague to spread, even though they must have known that the right medication can stall it for years. Suddenly she thinks, that's it. By monopolizing the medicine and manipulating prices through Gilead. She recalls his brother's words, "There is another ally who supports my cause. An ally with powers beyond imagination." Then she recalls the moment Marianne met the man, "Do this little thing for us, and we will ensure that you are rewarded handsomely." We need to start sowing the seeds of discord between him and the nobility if we're to bring Riadon to heel. She clutched her cloths, thinking, Dietrich gets to reap the profits and use the funds to shake the empire from its core. She thinks, the Gilead Trading Guild has been working with my brother all along. She starts trembling while thinking, I need to tell everyone before it's too late. Meanwhile, Canach comes holding her hat and said, Eusebia. He asked, You seem troubled? Is something the matter? Hearing his voice, she gets shocked and turns shouting his name, Canach. She rushed towards him saying, "This is more serious than we thought." "The river?" Canach asked. "The river?" Suddenly she paused and starts sweating. She thinks, would he believe me? Can I really afford to tell him the truth? What if I failed to convince him? I can't reveal what I've learned without also telling him how I managed to obtain the information. He recalls his brother's words, "To the people out there, this so-called magic of yours would be no more than a cheap parlor trick." How disappointed would our subjects be to learn that the power of their princess ends at prattling with weeds and leaves? She thinks, wouldn't he be disappointed to learn about my meager ability? He drops the hat and hugs her saying, "It's all right." Hearing this, she gets shocked. She asked, "What?" He replied, "Something stops you from speaking freely." He said, "I don't know what this is about. But I can tell you this, I will never doubt a word that falls from your lips." Eusebia asked him, "No matter what I say?" He replied, "No matter what you say. You have my complete trust, Eusebia." Tears fell down from her eyes and she said, "Canach." She starts crying and said, "The truth is She tells him about her ability and he said, "I see. I had no idea you had such abilities." Eusebia said, "I understand if you're upset. Even I would be repelled to learn that my secrets are open to others." He turns towards her asking, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Without this ability of yours, we would never have discovered the cause of the plague. We owe our lives to you. All of us." He asked, "How could I be upset?" Eusebia said, "Thank you for trusting me, Canach." She said, "I'm grateful to know that I am of some use to you. The rigor will end, I promise." She said, "And I believe I'm getting close to the solution." They came back to the palace and Simon shows her a report saying, "Here, madam. White patches on the patient's chest and belly. All of these patients had been critically ill before their condition suddenly improved." Aslan said, "The rigor is incurable at the moment. They must have taken the Gilear medicine to alleviate the pain. One of its components probably caused the discoloration." Simon said, "Probably. But I believe the magic alters the structure of the medicine's components. It won't be easy to identify." Eusebia, seeing the papers, said, "Skin discoloration is more common among elves." Simon asked, "Elves?" She said, "I read about it in this book. Something to do with their herbs, apparently." Opening the book, she said, "And if this elven herb," she paused after saying, "has indeed been used as a component." Suddenly she thinks, it might be the clue we've been looking for. Meanwhile, Roman comes to Eusebia's brother and said, "I have come, your highness." Her brother said, "You're the only one in RKA making me wait." "Roman," he said, "I humbly beg your forgiveness. I have been at work." Her brother asked, "How is the experiment coming along?" He replied, "Your highness will be pleased with the results very soon." Her brother said, "Good. Do you have enough funds?" He replied, "The medicine is making enough revenue to cover the costs. Trade with the non-human races is also turning out to be quite lucrative." Her brother said, "Would that my sister had half your worth." He said, "Fool of a girl. What could be so difficult about gathering a piece of information?" Roman smirks while asking, "Does your highness recall my previous counsel?" He said, "Should the princess become an obstacle to our design, deal with her accordingly." Her brother asked, "Has my sister proven herself an obstacle?" Roman said, "Our spies report that the emperor and the empress set out to the Fihar under disguise. Perhaps just a harmless afternoon walk. Or perhaps not. One can never be too vigilant." Her brother gets shocked hearing this and asked, "Have they caught on to our plan?" Roman replied, "Rest assured, sire. The princess will never reach me. To her, I am the faceless shadow in the dark." Simon said, "I wonder why I didn't think of tracking the medicine components before. Probably because I don't understand the subject as deeply as your majesty." Eusebia said, "Simon," he starts trembling and said this. Suddenly he holds Eusebia's hand saying, "This is amazing." Simon said, "Please, madam, I'd love to learn about herbs. This could advance our medical research to a whole new level. Many physicians here don't give herbology the credit it deserves." Meanwhile, Canach comes and said, "You seem pleased." He said, "Perhaps your hunt for clues has turned up some promising leads." Seeing him, Eusebia said, "Canach." Showing the book to him, she said, "We managed to identify one of the components." Canach, reading the book, said, "A medicinal herb commonly used by dark elves." She said, "Yes, and that's the problem. It's impossible to find elven herbs here." Canach said, "There may be a way." Hearing this, she gets shocked, and Aslan said, "He's right, madam. His Majesty has implemented various tactics to counter Giliar's monopoly on trade with non-human races. In fact, we have recently managed to strike a trade deal with the dwarves without the guild's knowledge. This may come in handy for madam, since dwarves and dark elves are long-standing allies." Hearing this, she asked, "Are you saying we can use the connection to arrange a meeting with the dark elves?" He replied, "Not a chance." Guildmaster said to Aslan in a bar, "You want to see those pointy-eared fellows next? Silliest thing I've heard from a human today." Aslan said, "I don't understand, Guildmaster." He asked, "Have I not gained your trust?" The Guildmaster said, "Listen here. I won't deny that the deal fattened our purses. And it was about time we started considering other trading partners, given Giliar's monopoly on the market. Dark elves, however, are a different story." Aslan said, "I thought your people were on good terms with the elves." The Guildmaster said, "We are. But their hatred for your kind goes much deeper than you think. They never agree to a meeting with humans, even with us mediating." He taps on tables, saying, "I wasn't sure I should bring this up, but there have been attacks on the elves of late. And most of the victims were those who had settled near human lands. I don't need to tell you who they hold responsible." He said, "The elves are our longtime allies. I can't just bring humans to their doorstep. And have you even told me your real name? I doubt it's Ben." He said, "If it's just their herbs you need, here are some seeds. A token of my thanks for good business." Aslan said, "Wait." The Guildmaster leaves, saying, "I wish you good fortune, human." Eusebia said, "I had no idea that the elves were facing such hard times. We managed to get the seeds somehow, but I doubt we can cultivate them without elven help." Canach said to her, "I've failed you, Eusebia." She said, "You couldn't have foreseen this." Meanwhile, she thinks, it's too soon to give up. Canach and Aslan have done their best to procure the seeds. What comes next is up to me. I have to think of a way. After some time, Canach comes to Eusebia and said, "Eusebia." He gives her a shawl, saying, "You're making a habit of starting the day here." Eusebia said, "Canach, a record which says dark elves rely on magic to cultivate their herbs. Mine might not be as potent, but it blends well with the energy of the earth. All I can do now is wait and observe." She thinks, these seeds are the only available lead we have at the moment. I have to make them sprout, but will my weakened magic be enough? What if it isn't? Meanwhile, Canach touches her face. He said, "You're cold? How long have you been here?" He said, "Marianne seemed concerned for your health. She said you haven't been eating and sleeping properly, and that you're losing weight at an alarming rate." Canach said, "It's not just her." Kissing her hand, he said, "Everyone is worried about you, Eusebia. We're all waiting for you to unload the burden weighing on your mind. And each of us is doing what little he can to help you along the way. One for one. Long to return to the mornings where I get to bring fresh flowers to my sleeping wife. And what a long wait it is." He said, "Please, Eusebia, don't leave me alone today." He clutched his shirt, saying, "Canach." Meanwhile, she thinks, how could I have allowed myself to lose sight of the reason I'm fighting and the people who gave me the strength to try again? It was because of this man that I came to appreciate and love this land for what it is. She, brushing his hairs with her hand, said, "Canach." She asked him, "May I kiss you?" Hearing this, he gets confused and asked, "Pardon?" She said, "May I kiss you? I understand if it's too sudden." He replied, "No." Canach smiled, saying, "We haven't done this in a while." He comes close to her, saying, "Even though we were meant to rehearse." Suddenly she blocks him, saying, "Wait." She comes close to him and kissed him. She said, "I will take the lead." Canach hugs her tightly and kissed her. He kissed her neck and she said, "Slower, Canach." She said, "But don't stop. Just a little more." Eusebius, sitting on his lap, said, "You can let go of me now." Canach kissed her, saying, "Not yet. Who knows when I'll get another chance." He said, "I won't keep you too long from your work, Eusebia. So just let me stay like this a little longer." Eusebius said, "I'm sorry. They used to call me Arcia's only hope back home. They hadn't seen a guardian in centuries, you see, and I was expected to bring RKA back to its golden age. Everyone seemed to depend on me, and before I knew it, I found myself believing that I alone had to shoulder those impossible demands." Hearing this, Canach said, "Eusebia?" She said, "But thanks to you, that has changed now." She said, "You taught me that there are people who care for me, those who'd give me their trust no matter what. And it's only right that I reciprocate the support I've received. If I am to battle the plague, it would be with you. There is no one else I trust more." Suddenly she noticed something in his pocket and asked, "What's that in your pocket?" He replied, "If you could just stop moving, I'll take it out for you." He takes the bottle from his pocket and said, "It's a bottle of water collected from the river just this morning. I thought fresh samples might come in handy for your research." He sighed and said, "A bottle of water? At times like this, I scoff at how pathetic I am." He said, "What use is the seat of the emperor if I can't even help you with your work? Being a sorcerer would have served me better. I could be of more use to you that way." Eusebius said, "You make it sound as if you became the emperor for my sake." He said, "That is entirely correct." She stands and said, "Now that's a joke our dear Lord Aslan wouldn't appreciate." He said, "I wasn't joking at all." He said, "There was a time when my greatest wish was to wield magic. A magic powerful enough to bend the world to my will." She said, "I see. Then you're fortunate to have chosen this path instead." She said, "Here, let me take an example." She said, "Let's say this bottle is your heart, and the water the amount of mana it can contain. Every creature is born with a different capacity for mana. While most people can only handle a modest amount, just enough to fill a bottle, a select few are born with an entire river's worth of magic. We call these people sorcerers." She said, "Human sorcerers are considered rare? Even those who are born with magical aptitude often lack the necessary amount of mana to truly harness it." She said, "For you to wield magic, you'd have to be a non-human first. An elf, for example. All elves are sorcerers." He said, "You've completely shattered a man's dream." She replied, I only sought to give you a more realistic picture. Are you upset?" Canach asked, "Have you ever met other sorcerers?" She replied, "I can't say I have. But I would love to. I don't think I've ever come across other magic users though, or I would have known right away. Sorcerers have the ability to detect the magical signatures of other magic users, you see. That's why." Suddenly she stands thinking, come to think of it, I remember sensing something from Edie's. It was too faint to notice at the time. But there is no mistake. It was magic. Edie's is a human born with the capacity for magic. That explains it. I thought it was strange that the rigor only spreads among humans, yet the key to curing it is an elven herb. Skin discoloration is common among elves, who are born with a natural affinity for magic. And this same symptom has somehow manifested in patients of the rigor. This plague is a weapon that targets humans born with magical aptitude. A servant comes to Roman's room saying, "You called for me, Guildmaster?" He said, "Come in, come in." "Gilly, your Guildmaster," Roman said, "I have an urgent matter that requires your assistance. Also, how are we doing with the banquet preparations?" The servant said, "Everything is in order, sir. All the invitations have been sent out." Giving an envelope to him, he said, "Not all, surely? I have one here that is yet to be dispatched. Guests of honor I'm looking forward to meeting with bated breath." The servant asked, "It's addressed to the Imperial Palace, sir." A man went to Marianne's place and said, "Hello, Marianne. I hope you've been keeping well." He asked her, "How is your mistress faring these days?" She replied, "As well as ever, my lord. She attends to her duties and reads in the library when she has the time." He asked, "Has she been in contact with anyone?" She replied, "Not since that tea gathering, no. She doesn't seem too keen on socializing with the nobility." He said, "Back to being a useless, sheltered princess again, Marianne said, "Begging your pardon, my lord. There's nothing of note at the moment." Taking the invitation envelope from his coat, he said, "That's all right. I'm not here to ask about the Empress." He gives the envelope to her, saying, "Here, an invitation to a banquet hosted by the Gilead Trading Guild." She gets confused and asked, "A banquet?" The man said, "A gesture of goodwill for the nobility, shall we say, before the medicine is made available nationwide. Draw the Empress's attention to this event." She takes it, saying, "My lord?" He said, "It's a simple enough task. Her Majesty might be interested to learn that this is a perfect opportunity to forge new, useful connections. Or if that's too much trouble, just drop the envelope where she can find it. Her bedchamber, perhaps?" She asked him, "Does this order come from you or your associates?" He turned, saying, "Does that matter?" He said, "It's going to be an event to remember. I guarantee it. I look forward to hearing from you." Meanwhile, in the palace, Eusebia went to the patients and Simon said, "We weren't expecting visitors today, madam." Seeing her, he asked, "Is something the matter?" Eusebia thinks, "I was right. Everyone who's here because of the rigor has some degree of mana in them." She said, "Simon?" He replied, "Yes, your Majesty." Eusebia said, "I believe I may have found the truth behind this plague." Simon asked her, "Are you certain?" She replied, "Yes. I sense traces of mana in every rigor patient we have here. Every single person. This can't be just coincidence." She said, "The rigor is a disease that spreads only among those born with magical aptitude." Hearing this, Canach asked her, "What about you, then? That means you're at risk too." She replied, "Not to worry. I haven't noticed any symptoms so far. I tried pouring the river water you brought me on my hand after suppressing my magic as much as I could. I felt my fingers stiffen a little, but that was all. It appears the disease affects only those who possess a minute amount of mana. Below a certain level, most people don't even realize they are born with magic. This is an insidious plot that targets the vast majority of our citizens." Hearing this, Aslan stands and asked, "A plot?" Aslan asked, "Does your Majesty mean to say that the rigor was created artificially?" She replied, "Well, She clenched her claws, saying, "Yes. That's exactly it. I believe this plague originated from a spell cast on the Fihar. I apologize for not letting you know sooner, but I wanted to be absolutely sure before voicing my suspicion." Aslan said, "Better late than never. Thank you for this." He said, "We'll have to find a solution. Do we know what sort of magic was used?" She said, "My guess is as good as yours. Magic is much like a piece of writing. Only through a painstaking reading can one discover the answer. In order to dispel the magic unleashed upon the river, we'll first have to figure out the intent behind the spell and put an end to its effects. A nigh impossible task unless we can somehow interrogate the caster directly." Canach said, "If what you're saying is true, then the distributor of the medicine should be," she said, "yes. There should be a connection between Gilead and the sorcerer who caused this." Simon said, "To risk the lives of countless innocents for mere profit. How could anyone commit such an atrocity knowingly?" Eusebia said, "We need to keep a level head. Not all is lost." Aslan asked, "What's this?" Eusebia said, "An invitation given to Marianne by a Gilead insider." Aslan said, "They want to market their medicine nationwide, and the banquet is the premiere of their business." Eusebia said, "It's addressed to me. They seem eager to have me there. Aslan shouts, out of the question, Your Majesty. I understand that time is of the essence, but we can't let you walk into such a glaring trap. Canach placed his hand on her shoulder saying, Eusebia. He said, Please don't. Eusebia said, I'm fully aware of the risks. But I'll feel even worse if I stay cooped up in the palace while people are dying. Besides, there's a chance that the caster of the curse will also attend. And even if they don't, I can still search for connections between Gillier and the sorcerer in question. She holds his hand saying, We can do this together. When I see the guild master of Gillier, I want you to be there too. I need your help more than anything. Canach replied, How could I refuse? He kissed her hand saying, When you're showering me with such trust? He said, Send a reply to Gillier's guild master. Aslan shouts, Your Majesty. He said, The Emperor and Empress of Riadon are pleased to attend the banquet. A lady standing next to Canach and Eusebia at banquet said, I thought this was just a social event, but they even prepared hunting grounds. I can't remember the last time I was this excited for a banquet. Eusebia said, I was aware that Gillier boasts a long history. But for a mere trading guild to own a forest this vast, Canach sighed and said forests. He said, Forests are full of insects and wild animals. You never know when they'll attack. The wilderness is much too dangerous for someone as fragile as you. She replied, I'm not that fragile, Canach. Meanwhile she thinks, I can't put it out of my mind. Seeing him keeps reminding me of what Marianne said. She recalls her words, Is Madame aware that the Emperor visits the kitchens every day? The kitchens? What for? It only came to my attention yesterday, Madame. His Majesty has taken it upon himself to be your food taster. He insists on sampling every dish himself to make sure it is safe. The cooks are greatly troubled, from what I hear. Eusebia said, I didn't know. Why would he go to such lengths for my sake? Marianne said, Perhaps that's how much he cares about your well-being. We were all very worried when His Majesty expressed his wish to attend the banquet in person. But now that we know how important Madame is to him, we have every confidence in your safe return. With him at your side, there is nothing to fear. Go, Madame, and reclaim the future of this nation for all of us. Canach said, Eusebia? Eusebia, she suddenly comes out of her thoughts. He said, You seem deep in thought. She flushed and replied, Oh, meanwhile she thinks, I wonder what I am to him. And how do I really feel about him? Canach said, Just say the word if you're having second thoughts. It's not too late to turn back. She thinks, I still don't have a clear answer. She holds his hand saying, No. She said, You're here with me? What could possibly go wrong? Meanwhile she thinks, But I can say for sure I no longer feel unsafe in his presence. Meanwhile Roman comes to stage saying, Thank you, honored guests, for gracing us with your presence today. I, Roman, welcome you to this celebration. Seeing him she thinks, So he's the guild master. Roman said, Before we begin, I would like to remind you that every creature in these woods is monitored under close observation. Your safety, after all, is our utmost priority. Please, enjoy the hunt. Canach said to Eusebia, I'll go into the woods. You should keep to the outskirts. She replied, All right. I'll make sure to stay safe. He said, Good. I'll do my best to bring back the information you need. I promise. Eusebia, with a smile on his face, said, May your hunt be fruitful. Canach gets ready for the hunt and sits on his horse. He raised a piece of cloth. While kissing it, he said this time, I will be your knight. Meanwhile Roman shouts, Ladies and gentlemen, let the hunt begin. Meanwhile Eusebia went to the forest, and thinks standing next to a tree, this should be far enough from the crowd. This forest is one of Gillier's sites of operation. There should be some kind of clue we can find here. She asked the tree, Can you hear me? I'm in need of your help. Could you share your wisdom with me? Seeing her doing magic, tree said, Magic? She's a sorcerer. Away with you. She thinks something isn't right. They're not usually this wary of me. She said, Please calm down. I don't mean harm. I'm here to ask about the owners of this forest. The tree said, Betrayer. Destroyer. Butcher. Fiend. Hell awaits you. Hearing this, she gets shocked and asked, SW what? Suddenly the tree takes her into his memory. Eusebia thinks, is this the tree's memory? A cart. What's it carrying? Roman, checking corpses, said, This batch isn't up to par. Progress will be delayed at this rate. Seeing him, she gets shocked and scared and thinks that's Gilliar's guild master. Seeing him, she thinks, what's he doing with the corpses? And those noises? His body's been transforming since he lowered his hood. Is that magic? Roman transforms into his original body and said, Well then, let's see what can be done with these. She thinks this can't be, so that sorcerer has been masquerading as Gilliar's guild master. The sheer amount of magical force he exudes. Is it really the same man? To think that a practitioner of such caliber still exists. She comes back and the tree said, That's the man who brought ruin to this land. He's incurred the wrath of the goddess. He has been discarding the bodies of his failed experiments here. Hearing this, she thinks, failed experiments? What exactly has been happening here? Meanwhile, all of them gathers in hall and Canach asked her, I heard you returned in haste. Is something the matter? She said, Canach. While trying to take a wine glass, she said, The forest, it's. Meanwhile, Roman interrupts her saying, We are honored beyond words to receive Riadon's Empress. He said, Roman, at your service? She starts sweating by his presence. She thinks, it's more noticeable up close. I have never encountered this level of power before. His magic is beyond anything I can muster. I thought he was the same sorcerer who was under my brother's employ, but no. Their magical signatures are different. There is little chance that they are one and the same. But what could they have been doing with those corpses? Did they manage to develop a cure through human experiments? Roman said, I must say I am overjoyed. I have been waiting to discuss the future of the realm with the imperial family. Canach said, The future of the realm? Roman said, Indeed, sire. The realm is in unrest, and the causes are many. The rigor being one of them. She thinks, I need to keep my wits about me. And exhales. She thinks, I'll use this opportunity to uncover their true motive for monopolizing the medicine. Eusebia said, I hear your guild has built apothecaries across the realm to allow easier access to the medicine. She said while drinking the wine, a commendable strategy. But I wonder if accessibility is truly the reason that people are unable to afford the cure. She asked him, What do you think, Master Roman? He replied, Such complexities are beyond me, madam. I only seek to earn an imperial warrant for our establishments. That way, even the small folk who are oblivious to Gilliar's name and influence would be encouraged to buy our product and receive necessary treatment. We only hope to bring normalcy and relief to more people. Eusebia tries to say something, but he interrupts her saying, With respect, madam. Riadon has only recently come into existence. Only two currencies matter when it comes to a nation's survival: military power and capital. Without them, leaders are unable to hold their subjects' allegiance. What I offer you is the key to securing the enduring loyalty of your subjects. She clutched her cloth, saying, So the well-being of our people is the last thing on your mind. You ask for an imperial warrant, yet you are unashamed to admit that profit is your only priority. She thinks, why do these things keep happening? I'm already at my wits' end trying to deal with Dietrich's plots, and each day brings new enemies. There is nothing I can do on my own. Meanwhile, Canach holds her shoulder, saying, If that is what you believe, I'm afraid there will be no imperial warrant for your guild. Hearing this, she gets surprised. Canach said, The Empress seems reluctant to entertain your request, Master Roman, and I am an obedient husband who only wants to make his wife happy. Roman glares at them and said, I see. He bowed and said, Well, I thank your majesties for considering my offer regardless. Please let not this brief discussion detract you from enjoying our hospitality. There is much in store for our guests of honor tonight. They come outside to enjoy the fireworks, and Canach asked her, Are you all right, Eusebia? What were you trying to tell me? Eusebia replied, Not here. Too many years. Seeing him, she thinks strange. Whenever things seem hopeless and impossible, he somehow manages to make me feel better just by holding me close to him. Eusebia said, I'm fine. What could possibly go wrong when you're here with me? She thinks the truth is, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about you. I'm not even sure I can explain the nature of this relationship. But once everything is taken care of and the impending war is prevented, I'd like to share my secrets with you so you can accept me as I am. Would that this moment could last forever? While taking 2 glasses of drinks, Canach said, You must be parched. I shall fetch drinks. He tastes the drink, saying, Let's see. He gives the drink to Eusebia, saying, It's safe. She said, You're the one who needs a food taster, not me. He replied, I'm not as worthy as you think I am. She replied, You are? He laughed and said, I'd wager no one here is more resistant to poison than me. Trust me, I'm the best food taster you'll find. Saying, I won't let anything happen to you, he noticed Eusebia. Her mouth starts bleeding, and in a moment her hand covers with blood. She gets unconscious and Canach dashed to catch her. She coughed and Canach's face covers with her blood. He catches her and Simon runs towards them. Canach shouts, No, please. He said, It's all my fault. I should never have allowed myself to yearn for you. He starts crying and said, I was ready to give my life for you. That was my wish. But now, he said, I will never forgive this. I will find those who did this to you and have them quartered alive. I shall tear their tongues out as they beg for mercy. Their families will watch and suffer the same pain and loss. She thinks, Canach? I can't leave him now. It's going to happen all over again. Please, not like this. She lost her life in Canach's arms.